Greetings, brave warriors and shield maidens. If you seek the strength and wisdom of the ancient Vikings, you've come to the right place. Don't waste time. Subscribe to the channel now and join our horde to strengthen this community of true Vikings. As you can see, our channel is new, so your subscription is crucial to our growth. If you're a true fan of the Vikings, show your support. Let the power of the Viking axe guide your hand to click the like button, and in the comments, tell us which city you're watching from so we know where in the world our stories are reaching, all because the air crackled with an otherworldly energy as Ragnar Ironside, fierce Viking warrior, felt the ground disappear beneath his feet. One moment, he stood on the blood-soaked battlefield of his homeland. The next, he was falling through a vortex of swirling colors and deafening noise. His heart pounded frantically in his chest, fear and confusion overwhelming his senses as he tumbled through time and space. "Odin's beard!" Ragnar roared, his voice lost in the maelstrom. "What sorcery is this?" As suddenly as it began, the journey ended. Ragnar crashed onto hard, unfamiliar ground, his head spinning and his stomach churning. He lay there for a moment, gasping for breath, his mind reeling from the impossible experience. Slowly he pushed himself up, his muscular arms trembling with effort. The world that greeted him was beyond anything he could have imagined. Gone were the familiar rolling hills and dense forests of his homeland. In their place stood towering structures of glass and steel, reaching impossibly high into the sky. The ground beneath his feet was not earth, but a strange, hard surface marked with yellow lines. Ragnar stumbled to his feet, his leather armor and furs feeling suddenly out of place in this alien landscape. He gripped his axe tightly, the familiar weight providing little comfort in this bewildering new world. "Where am I?" he muttered, his eyes wide with disbelief. Has Loki himself cast me into some twisted realm? The cacophony of modern life assaulted his senses. Strange, horseless carriages roared past him, spewing noxious fumes. People hurried by, their eyes fixed on small glowing devices in their hands, barely sparing a glance for the disoriented Viking in their midst. The air was filled with unfamiliar scents and sounds, a constant drone of noise that made Ragnar's head throb. He stumbled forward, his boots scuffing against the pavement. A group of young women gave him a wide berth, giggling and whispering to each other. Ragnar caught fragments of their speech, but the words made no sense to him. "Hey, look at that guy. Is he like some kind of cosplayer? That axe looks so real." Ragnar growled in frustration, unable to comprehend their strange tongue. He pressed on, his eyes darting from one incomprehensible sight to another. Bright, flashing signs advertised products he couldn't begin to understand. Music blared from unseen sources, a cacophony of styles that assaulted his ears. As he wandered, lost and confused, Ragnar's growing agitation began to draw attention. People started to give him a wider berth, some pulling out their phones to record the strange, wild-looking man with the axe. It wasn't long before the local authorities took notice. Two police officers approached Ragnar cautiously, their hands hovering near their holsters. "Sir, I'm going to need you to put down the weapon," one officer called out, his voice firm but wary. Ragnar spun to face them, his grip tightening on his axe. "Who are you to command me?" he snarled in Old Norse, his stance shifting to a fighting position. "I am Ragnar Ironside, and I fear no man." The officers exchanged glances, clearly not understanding a word. "Sir, we don't want any trouble. Just put down the axe and we can talk this out." But Ragnar was beyond reason, his confusion and fear manifesting as aggression. He raised his axe, a war cry building in his throat. What happened next was a blur of shouting, scuffling, and the sharp crack of a taser. Ragnar found himself on the ground, his muscles spasming, the unfamiliar sensation of electricity coursing through his body. As darkness crept into the edges of his vision, his last conscious thought was a prayer to the gods to deliver him from this nightmare. When Ragnar awoke, he found himself in a small, confined space. The holding cell was a stark contrast to the open fields and longhouses he was accustomed to. Panic set in as he realized his axe and armor had been taken from him, leaving him feeling vulnerable and exposed. "Let me out!" he roared, pounding his fists against the cell door. "Face me like warriors, you cowards!" His cries echoed through the precinct, drawing concerned looks from the officers on duty. Among them was Dr. Samantha Green, a psychiatrist who had been called in to evaluate the strange, violent man they had brought in. Samantha observed Ragnar through the one-way glass, her brow furrowed in concentration. There was something about this man that didn't fit any pattern she had seen before. His clothing, his manner of speech, even the way he carried himself, it all spoke of a different time, a different world. "What's his story?" she asked the detective standing beside her. The detective shrugged. "No ID, no records. He doesn't speak a word of English, or any other language we've tried. And get this, and when we brought him in, he was carrying an honest-to-God battle axe, like something out of a Viking movie." Samantha's curiosity was piqued. She had dealt with all manner of psychological cases, but this was something entirely new. "Has he been violent since you brought him in?" "Not yet, but he's been agitated. Keeps shouting in that weird language of his. We're hoping you can calm him down. Maybe figure out what's going on in his head." Samantha nodded, her mind already working on strategies to approach this unusual case. But before she could make a move, the situation took a drastic turn. Inside the cell, Ragnar's confusion and fear had been slowly giving way to a familiar, terrifying sensation. The berserker rage, a state he had entered many times on the battlefield, began to bubble up from the depths of his being. In his own time, this fury had made him an unstoppable force, a whirlwind of destruction on the battlefield. Here, in this small, confined space, it was about to become a disaster. With a primal roar that shook the very walls, Ragnar's berserker rage erupted. His eyes rolled back in his head, spittle flew from his mouth, and veins bulged in his neck and arms. With strength that seemed inhuman, he began to tear at the cell, ripping the bed from its bolts, smashing the toilet, and pounding against the walls with such force that the entire precinct shook. "Oh my God," Samantha gasped, watching in horror and fascination as Ragnar unleashed his fury. Officers rushed to subdue him, but Ragnar was beyond reason or restraint. He fought like a man possessed, tossing fully grown men aside as if they were children. The holding area descended into chaos, filled with shouts, the sound of breaking furniture, and Ragnar's animalistic roars. It took several minutes and multiple officers to finally subdue Ragnar. As the berserker rage subsided, he found himself once again on the floor panting heavily, surrounded by the destruction he had wrought. The cell was in shambles, barely recognizable as the sterile space it had been just moments before. As Ragnar's senses slowly returned, he looked around at the devastation with a mix of shock and shame. This was not the noble combat of a Viking warrior, but the senseless destruction of a beast. For the first time since arriving in this strange new world, Ragnar felt truly lost and alone. Samantha, watching from behind the safety of the reinforced glass, felt her heart race with a mixture of fear and excitement. This case was unlike anything she had ever encountered, and she knew that unraveling the mystery of this strange, violent man would be the challenge of a lifetime. As the dust settled and the officers regrouped, Samantha made a decision. She would find a way to communicate with this man, to understand his story. The holding area of the Chicago police precinct was unnaturally quiet in the aftermath of Ragnar's berserker rage. The Viking warrior sat in the corner of his demolished cell, his broad shoulders slumped in defeat. Dr. Samantha Green stood outside, her hand hovering over the door handle, steeling herself for what lay ahead. Taking a deep breath, Samantha pushed the door open and stepped inside. Ragnar's head snapped up, his piercing blue eyes locking onto her with a mixture of wariness and curiosity. Samantha raised her hands in a placating gesture, her voice soft and calm as she spoke. "Hello," she said, careful to enunciate clearly. "My name is Samantha. I'm here to help you." Ragnar's brow furrowed in confusion. The words were unfamiliar, but something in the woman's tone and body language spoke of peace. He straightened slightly, his muscles tensing as he prepared for any potential threat. Havernig derfist thu ad nalgast mig kona, Ragnar growled, his Old Norse as incomprehensible to Samantha as her English was to him. Samantha shook her head, a small smile on her face. I'm sorry, I don't understand your language, but I want to try and communicate with you. She pointed to herself. Samantha, she said clearly, then gestured to him with an questioning look. Ragnar hesitated for a moment, then slowly nodded in understanding. He thumped his chest with his fist. Ragnar, he said, his deep voice resonating in the small space. Ragnar Ironside. Samantha's smile widened. Ragnar, she repeated, nodding. It was a small victory, but a significant one. She lowered herself to sit cross-legged on the floor, maintaining eye contact with Ragnar but giving him space. For several minutes, they sat in silence, each studying the other. Samantha noted the intricate braids in Ragnar's beard, the scars that crisscrossed his arms, the way his eyes darted around the room as if constantly assessing for threats. Ragnar, in turn, was captivated by Samantha's calm demeanor, so at odds with the chaos he had experienced since arriving in this strange world. Slowly, Ragnar's rigid posture began to relax. He sensed no immediate danger from this woman, and her presence was oddly comforting in its normalcy. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, tinged with a vulnerability that surprised even him. Var egg? He asked, gesturing around the cell. Vader Tessi Stadur. Samantha tilted her head, trying to decipher his meaning. She pointed to the ground, then swept her arm in a wide arc. Chicago, she said. You're in Chicago. Chicago, Ragnar repeated slowly, tasting the foreign word. He shook his head, frustration evident on his face. How could he explain that this place, this Chicago, was not where he belonged? Samantha watched as Ragnar's expression shifted from confusion to desperation. She could see him struggling to find a way to communicate, to make her understand. In that moment, her professional detachment began to crack, replaced by a deep well of empathy for this lost soul. Ragnar stood suddenly, startling Samantha, but instead of approaching her, he began to pantomime, his strong hands sketching shapes in the air. He mimicked the action of swinging an axe, then pointed to himself and held up his fingers, counting. 100,000? Samantha guessed, trying to follow his meaning. Ragnar shook his head, frustration mounting. He pointed to himself again, then to the floor, then made a spinning motion with his finger before pointing to the ground once more. Samantha's eyes widened as understanding began to dawn. Are you trying to tell me you're from a different time? Ragnar couldn't understand her words, but the spark of recognition in her eyes gave him hope. He nodded vigorously, encouraged by this small breakthrough. Samantha's mind reeled. The logical part of her brain insisted this was impossible. That time travel was the stuff of science fiction. But as she looked at Ragnar, his clothing, his manner, the ancient language he spoke, a seed of doubt took root. Okay, she said slowly, more to herself than to Ragnar. Let's say, hypothetically, that you're from the past. How far back? Can you show me? She held up her fingers, starting with 1. 100 years? She shook her head, continuing to count. 200? 300? Ragnar watched intently, understanding dawning in his eyes. When Samantha reached 10, he stopped her, nodding emphatically. 1,000 years? Samantha breathed, disbelief warring with fascination. You're telling me you're from 1,000 years in the past? Ragnar, sensing her understanding, began to speak rapidly, his words tumbling out in a torrent of Old Norse. He spoke of his homeland, of a great battle, of a witch's curse that had torn him from everything he knew and hurled him into this bewildering future. Samantha couldn't understand the words, but the emotion behind them was clear. She saw the pain in Ragnar's eyes, the desperation in his gestures, and despite every rational thought screaming that this was impossible, She found herself beginning to believe. "Okay, Ragnar," she said softly, reaching out to place a hand on his arm. "I believe you. I don't understand how, but I believe you." The touch, gentle and reassuring, broke through Ragnar's frenzy. He looked down at Samantha's hand, then back to her face, seeing the acceptance there. For the first time since arriving in this strange future, Ragnar felt a glimmer of hope. "Thakka ter fyrir," he said softly, covering her hand with his own. "Thank you," he added in halting English, a phrase he had heard repeated often since his arrival. Samantha smiled, squeezing his arm gently. "You're welcome, Ragnar. We're going to figure this out together, okay?" As they sat there, a Viking warrior and a modern psychiatrist connected by an impossible tale, a spark of understanding passed between them. It was a fragile thing, this newfound trust, but it was a start. Samantha's mind was already racing, trying to process the implications of Ragnar's story. If what he was saying was true, and against all logic she was beginning to believe it was, then they were facing a challenge unlike any in history. How does one help a man displaced not just in space, but in time itself? For Ragnar, the relief of finding someone who believed him, who was willing to listen and help, was overwhelming. The terrifying strangeness of this new world still pressed in on him from all sides, but now he had an anchor, a point of stability in the chaos. As the sun began to set outside the precinct windows, casting long shadows across the demolished cell, Samantha and Ragnar continued their silent communication. Through gestures, drawings scratched on the cell floor, and the occasional word understood by both, they began to build a bridge across the centuries that separated them. It was a small beginning, fraught with challenges and misunderstandings yet to come. But in that moment, as a Viking berserker and a Chicago psychiatrist forged an unlikely alliance, the impossible suddenly seemed within reach. The door to Samantha's apartment swung open, revealing a world that Ragnar could scarcely comprehend. He stood frozen on the threshold, his imposing frame filling the doorway as his eyes darted from one marvel to another. Samantha gently placed a hand on his back, encouraging him to step inside. "It's okay, Ragnar," she said softly, guiding him into the living room. "This is my home. You're safe here." Ragnar moved cautiously, his calloused hands brushing against the smooth walls. The apartment was a far cry from the rough-hewn longhouses of his time. Clean lines, sleek furniture, and gleaming surfaces surrounded him. He turned in a slow circle, taking it all in with wide-eyed wonder. "Theta otrulegt," he murmured, his Old Norse lilting with awe. Samantha smiled, recognizing the tone of amazement, even if she couldn't understand the words. "I know it's very different from what you're used to," she said. "Let me show you around." She led him through the apartment, explaining each room and its purpose as best she could through gestures and simple words. Ragnar's expression alternated between confusion and fascination as he encountered each new aspect of modern life. In the kitchen, Samantha demonstrated the refrigerator, opening it to reveal the food inside. Ragnar jumped back, his hand instinctively reaching for the axe that was no longer at his side. "Vad theta galdur," he exclaimed, peering cautiously into the illuminated interior. Samantha chuckled, pulling out a bottle of water. "It's not magic, Ragnar. It's technology. Here, feel how cold it is." She pressed the bottle into his hand, and Ragnar's eyes widened at the sensation. He looked from the bottle to the refrigerator and back, his mind struggling to comprehend the concept of artificial cooling. As they moved to the living room, Samantha's hand hovered over the television remote. She hesitated, unsure if Ragnar was ready for such a leap in technology. Deciding to take the risk, she pressed the power button. The screen flared to life, filling the room with sound and moving images. Ragnar recoiled, his body tensing as if preparing for battle. His eyes darted around the room, searching for the source of the voices and figures that seemed to be trapped in the black box. "Nornir og Valkyrier," he shouted, backing away from the TV. "Theta hluti of Bolvunini?" Samantha quickly turned off the television, realizing she had pushed too far too fast. "I'm sorry, Ragnar," she said, approaching him with her hands raised in a calming gesture. "It's not part of any curse. It's just a way we share information and stories in this time." Ragnar's breathing was heavy, his eyes wild with a mixture of fear and anger. The sudden onslaught of technology had triggered memories of the witch's curse that had flung him through time. For a moment, he was back on that battlefield, feeling the crackle of dark magic tearing him from his world. Seeing his distress, Samantha guided Ragnar to the couch sitting beside him. "It's okay," she soothed. "Take deep breaths. You're safe here." Gradually, Ragnar's tension eased. He looked at Samantha with a mixture of gratitude and embarrassment. Egg bidst av sökunar," he said softly. Though she didn't understand the words, Samantha recognized the apologetic tone. "No need to apologize," she said with a gentle smile. "This is all new to you. We'll take it slow." Over the next few hours, Samantha patiently introduced Ragnar to various aspects of her apartment. She showed him how to use the bathroom, explaining indoor plumbing as best she could. She demonstrated the microwave, heating up a meal that left Ragnar marveling at the speed and convenience. With each new discovery, Ragnar's fear began to give way to curiosity. He asked questions in his own language, which Samantha did her best to interpret and answer through gestures and simple English words. His childlike wonder at each new piece of technology warmed Samantha's heart, reminding her of the joy of discovery. As evening approached, Samantha turned on a small radio, filling the apartment with soft music. Ragnar's head snapped up at the sound, but this time there was more curiosity than fear in his eyes. "Vadan kemur thesi tonlist?" he asked, moving closer to the radio. Samantha smiled, tapping the radio. "Music," she said, "from all over the world." Ragnar closed his eyes, letting the unfamiliar melodies wash over him. For a moment he seemed at peace, the tension of the day melting from his shoulders. The moment was broken by a sudden shift in the radio broadcast. The music cut out, replaced by a news report. A serious voice filled the room, speaking rapidly in English. "Breaking news. The notorious North Side gang has struck again. Police report a series of violent robberies in the downtown area. Citizens are advised to stay alert and report any suspicious activity." Ragnar's posture changed instantly. Though he couldn't understand the words, the tone of urgency was clear. He turned to Samantha, his eyes sharp with interest. "Vad adgerast? Ogni nand?" he asked, his warrior instincts coming to the fore. Samantha hesitated, unsure how to explain the concept of organized crime to a Viking warrior. "There are bad people doing bad things in the city," she said slowly, miming the act of stealing. "But the police, our warriors, are handling it." Ragnar's face darkened, his hands clenching into fists. "Letu mig berjust," he growled. "Get sigrast a thessum ovenum." The fire in Ragnar's eyes worried Samantha. She could see the conflict within him, the desire to protect and fight warring with the overwhelming unfamiliarity of this new world. She placed a calming hand on his arm. "Not now, Ragnar," she said firmly. "You're still learning about this world. It's not safe for you to fight here." Ragnar didn't understand her words, but her tone and gesture were clear enough. He nodded reluctantly, the fire in his eyes dimming but not extinguishing completely. As night fell, Samantha prepared the guest room for Ragnar. She showed him how to use the bed, so different from the sleeping furs he was accustomed to. Ragnar sank onto the mattress, marveling at its softness. "Feel du vel," Samantha said, repeating a phrase Ragnar had used earlier. "Good night." Ragnar nodded, a small smile crossing his face. "Got night," he repeated haltingly. But sleep did not come easily for the Viking warrior. As the unfamiliar sounds of the city night filtered through the window, Ragnar tossed and turned. His mind was a whirlwind of the day's experiences, each new wonder and terror playing out behind his closed eyelids. In the depths of the night, the nightmares came. Ragnar found himself back on the battlefield, surrounded by the clash of steel and the cries of the dying. But this time, the enemies he faced were not rival Vikings or foreign invaders. They were shadowy figures wielding the strange weapons and devices of this new world. In his dream, Ragnar fought with all his might, but his axe seemed to pass through his foes like mist. The witch who had cursed him appeared, her laughter echoing across the dreamscape. Her words, unintelligible yet menacing, seemed to tighten around him like chains. Ragnar woke with a start, a cry dying on his lips. He sat up, disoriented in the darkness of the unfamiliar room. Sweat beaded on his brow, his heart pounding in his chest. The curse's grip felt stronger than ever, a constant reminder of how far he was from home. As he sat in the darkness, trying to calm his racing thoughts, Ragnar felt the full weight of his situation descend upon him. He was a man out of time, a warrior with no battle to fight, lost in a world he couldn't begin to understand. The wonder of the day's discoveries gave way to a deep, aching loneliness. But then, through the wall, he heard a soft sound. Samantha was moving about in her room, likely awakened by his cry. The knowledge that he wasn't entirely alone, that there was one person in this strange new world who was trying to understand and help him, provided a small measure of comfort. The community center buzzed with nervous energy as Samantha led Ragnar through its doors. The Viking warrior towered over the other attendees of the anger management group, his presence causing a ripple of whispers and wary glances. Samantha placed a reassuring hand on Ragnar's arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. "It's okay, Ragnar," she said softly. "These people are here to help, just like you." Ragnar nodded, his eyes darting around the room. He had made progress with English in the past few days, but the rapid conversations around him were still largely incomprehensible. He focused on Samantha's calm presence, using it as an anchor in this sea of uncertainty. The group formed a circle of chairs, with Ragnar and Samantha taking seats near the door. The group facilitator, a middle-aged man named Dave, cleared his throat to begin the session. "Welcome, everyone. I see we have a new face with us today," Dave said, nodding towards Ragnar. "Would you like to introduce yourself?" Samantha gave Ragnar an encouraging nod. The Viking stood, his massive frame causing several group members to lean back in their chairs. "I am Ragnar," he said, his deep voice tinged with a heavy accent. "I, new here, learning to control anger." Dave smiled, though there was a hint of nervousness in his eyes. "Welcome, Ragnar. We're glad to have you. Please have a seat." As the session progressed, various group members shared their experiences and struggles with anger. Ragnar listened intently, his brow furrowed in concentration as he tried to follow the discussions. Samantha quietly translated key points, helping him understand the context. About halfway through the session, a wiry man named Mike began to share his story. His voice was loud and aggressive, his body language tense as he recounted a recent argument with his boss. "I just wanted to punch that smug look off his face, you know," Mike said, his fists clenching. "Who does he think he is, talking to me like that?" Ragnar straightened in his chair, recognizing the familiar tones of anger and aggression. He nodded sympathetically, understanding the sentiment, even if he didn't grasp all the words. Mike noticed Ragnar's reaction and turned towards him. "You get it, don't you, big guy? Sometimes you just gotta let that rage out, right?" Before Samantha could intervene, Ragnar responded, "In my time, such disrespect would be answered with axe," he said, mimicking a chopping motion. The room fell silent, tension thick in the air. Mike's eyes narrowed, a challenge forming in his gaze. "Oh yeah? You think you're tough, huh? What are you, some kind of Viking cosplayer?" Ragnar stood, towering over Mike. "I am Viking warrior," he growled, his accent thickening with emotion. "I have faced death in battle many times. You know nothing of true strength." Mike jumped to his feet, getting in Ragnar's face despite the significant height difference. "You want to go, tough guy? Let's take this outside." Samantha quickly stepped between them, her hands raised. "Gentlemen, Please, this is not why we're here. Ragnar, remember what we practiced. Deep breaths. For a moment it seemed as if Ragnar might ignore her, his eyes blazing with the familiar fire of his berserker rage. But then, to everyone's surprise, he closed his eyes and took a deep, shuddering breath. Eger rolagur sem shiorin, Ragnar muttered, repeating a phrase Samantha had taught him. I am calm as the sea. The tension in his shoulders began to ease. He opened his eyes, looking down at Mike with a mixture of pity and understanding. I apologize, Ragnar said slowly. Anger is difficult. We both learn, yes? Mike blinked, clearly taken aback by the sudden de-escalation. After a moment he nodded, a grudging respect dawning in his eyes. Yeah, I guess we are. Sorry for pushing your buttons, man. As the two men sat down, a collective sigh of relief swept through the room. Dave, who had been poised to intervene, smiled broadly. That was excellent, Ragnar. Using a calming mantra in your native language is a great technique. Would you like to share more about how that helped you? Pride swelled in Ragnar's chest as he explained, with Samantha's help, how visualizing the calm sea of his homeland helped him control his anger. The rest of the session passed without incident, with several group members expressing admiration for Ragnar's quick turnaround. As the meeting concluded, Samantha couldn't help but beam with pride. Ragnar had faced a significant challenge and emerged victorious, not through violence but through self-control. It was a small step but an important one in his journey to adapt to this new world. However, her elation was short-lived. As she was gathering her things, Samantha overheard a conversation between Dave and another colleague, Dr. Renee Thompson. I'm worried about Samantha's involvement with this Ragnar character, Renee was saying, her voice low but clear. She's getting too emotionally invested. And did you hear him talk about axes in battle? He could be dangerous. Dave nodded, his expression concerned. I agree. There's something off about his story. Time travel? Vikings? It sounds like a delusion. Samantha's usually more objective than this. Samantha felt her cheeks burn with a mixture of embarrassment and indignation. She opened her mouth to defend herself, but before she could speak, she noticed Ragnar standing nearby, his face a mask of confusion and hurt. Ragnar, she started, reaching out to him, but the Viking warrior stepped back, shaking his head. They not believe, he said, his voice low and pained. They think I lie? You think I lie? Samantha's heart sank as she saw the trust they had built begin to crumble in Ragnar's eyes. No, Ragnar, I believe you. They just don't understand. Let me explain. But Ragnar was already moving towards the exit, his long strides carrying him swiftly away from her. Samantha hurried after him, leaving her bewildered colleagues behind. Outside, the cool evening air did little to calm the turmoil in Ragnar's mind. He paced back and forth, his hands clenching and unclenching as he struggled to process what he had overheard. Ragnar, please, Samantha pleaded, keeping her distance but trying to catch his eye. What you heard, it's complicated. People in our time, they struggle to believe in things they can't explain. Ragnar stopped pacing, fixing Samantha with a penetrating gaze. You bring me here, to these people. They think I am mad? Dangerous? Is that what you think? Samantha felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. No, Ragnar. I brought you here because I believe in you. I want to help you adjust to this world, to control your anger so you can find your place here. For a long moment, Ragnar said nothing, his blue eyes searching Samantha's face for any sign of deception. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. In my time, trust is earned in battle, in blood. Here, I know not how to trust. Samantha took a cautious step forward. Trust is earned through honesty and support, Ragnar. I promise you I'm on your side. We'll prove to them that your story is true. Together. Ragnar's posture relaxed slightly, but the doubt didn't fully leave his eyes. Together, he repeated, the word sounding like both a question and a tentative agreement. As they walked back to Samantha's apartment, an uneasy silence settled between them. The fragile bond they had formed felt strained, tested by the harsh realities of trying to bridge a 1,000-year gap. Ragnar's mind whirled with conflicting emotions: gratitude for Samantha's help, fear of being seen as a madman or a threat, and a deep, aching loneliness for a world that no longer existed. Samantha, for her part, felt the weight of her colleagues' doubt pressing down on her. Had she let her fascination with Ragnar's story cloud her professional judgment? Was she risking her career, her reputation, for a man who might indeed be suffering from an elaborate delusion? As they reached the apartment, Ragnar paused at the threshold, his hand resting on the doorframe. "Samantha," he said, his voice low and serious, "I am not lie. I am lost. But I am also warrior. I will find way in this world, with or without help." Samantha met his gaze, seeing the determination burning behind the doubt and fear. In that moment, she made her choice. "You'll have my help, Ragnar. Whatever it takes, we'll find your place in this world. I promise." As they entered the apartment, the tension between them eased slightly. They had weathered their first real test as allies in this strange journey. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges both external and internal. The bustling streets of Chicago stretched before Ragnar like an alien landscape. The Viking warrior stood at the threshold of Samantha's apartment building, his jaw set with determination. He had spent days learning about this new world, struggling to adapt and control his berserker nature. Now it was time to prove his worth, to show that he was more than just a relic from the past. "I go alone," Ragnar had told Samantha that morning, his broken English tinged with resolve. "Must see city with own eyes." Samantha had protested, of course, but Ragnar's mind was made up. He needed this, needed to face this strange new world on his own terms. As Ragnar stepped onto the sidewalk, his senses went into overdrive. The cacophony of car horns, the acrid smell of exhaust, the press of bodies hurrying past, it was overwhelming. But Ragnar was a warrior, trained to be alert in the chaos of battle. He squared his shoulders and began to walk, his eyes constantly scanning his surroundings. The city was a maze of towering buildings and narrow alleys. Ragnar found himself drawn to the darker, quieter streets, away from the main thoroughfares. These shadowy passages reminded him of the forests of his homeland, where danger could lurk behind any tree. As he turned down one such alley, a commotion caught his attention. Two men were struggling with a woman, trying to wrench her purse from her grasp. The woman's cries for help were drowned out by the distant traffic. Ragnar's body tensed, battle instincts kicking in. Without hesitation, he strode towards the scene, his voice booming in the confined space. "Hetu thesu strax," he roared in Old Norse before remembering to switch to English. "Stop now." The muggers turned, startled by the sudden intrusion. They took in Ragnar's imposing figure, his broad shoulders, his wild eyes, his hands curled into fists, and made a quick decision. One of them shoved the woman aside and pulled out a switchblade, while the other adopted a boxer's stance. "Mind your own business, big guy," the one with the knife snarled, "unless you want a new smile." Ragnar's lips curled into a feral grin. This, at least, was familiar territory. "I am Ragnar Ironside," he growled, falling into a fighting stance. "I have faced death on 100 battlefields. Your little knife does not frighten me." The muggers exchanged glances, momentarily thrown by Ragnar's strange manner of speech. That moment of hesitation was all Ragnar needed. He lunged forward, his massive fist connecting with the knife wielder's jaw in a devastating blow. The man crumpled to the ground, his weapon clattering away. The second mugger recovered quickly, launching into a flurry of quick jabs. Ragnar, used to the broad swings of axes and swords, found himself struggling to block the rapid punches. A few connected, splitting his lip and bruising his ribs. The taste of blood in his mouth ignited something primal in Ragnar. The world began to take on a red tinge as the familiar surge of berserker rage rose within him. His vision narrowed, focusing solely on his opponent. With a roar that echoed off the alley walls, Ragnar charged. He caught the mugger in a bear hug, lifting him off his feet and slamming him against the brick wall. The man's head snapped back, dazing him. Ragnar pressed his advantage, raining down blows with fists hardened by years of wielding sword and axe. The mugger raised his arms in a feeble attempt to protect himself, but Ragnar's assault was relentless. "Ragnar, stop!" The voice cut through the haze of battle rage. Ragnar blinked, his fist frozen mid-swing. He turned to see Samantha standing at the mouth of the alley, her eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. The moment of distraction was enough for the battered mugger to wriggle free and stumble away, supporting his semi-conscious partner. They disappeared around a corner, leaving Ragnar and Samantha alone with the shaken victim. Ragnar's chest heaved as he fought to control his breathing, the berserker rage slowly receding. He looked down at his bloodied knuckles, then back at Samantha, a flash of shame crossing his face. "Are you all right?" Samantha asked, approaching cautiously. She turned to the victim, who was clutching her purse tightly. "Ma'am, are you hurt? Do you need me to call someone?" The woman shook her head, her eyes darting between Samantha and Ragnar. No, I'm okay. Thank you," she said, addressing Ragnar. You saved me." Ragnar nodded solemnly. "It is duty of warrior to protect," he said, his accent thick with emotion. Samantha helped the woman to her feet. "You should go home now. It's not safe here." As the woman hurried away, the distant wail of police sirens reached their ears. Samantha's eyes widened in alarm. "We need to go, Ragnar, now." "Why run?" Ragnar asked, confusion evident on his face. "We did no wrong." Samantha grabbed his arm, pulling him towards the opposite end of the alley. "It's complicated. You're not officially here. And you're fighting. It's not exactly legal. We need to leave before the police arrive." Understanding dawned in Ragnar's eyes, and he allowed Samantha to lead him away. They ran through a maze of back alleys and side streets, the adrenaline of the fight and the chase coursing through their veins. As they ran, Ragnar felt a surge of exhilaration. For the first time since arriving in this strange future, he felt truly alive. The rush of battle, the thrill of victory, the excitement of fleeing danger, it was like being back in his own time, raiding foreign shores. Samantha, too, found herself caught up in the moment. Her heart raced, not just from the physical exertion, but from the sheer audacity of what they were doing. She, a respected psychiatrist, was running from the law with a time-displaced Viking warrior. It was absurd, dangerous, and utterly thrilling. They finally stopped in a small park, collapsing onto a bench as they caught their breath. For a moment, they sat in silence, the only sound their heavy breathing and the distant city noise. Then, unexpectedly, Ragnar began to laugh. It started as a low chuckle and grew into a full-bodied roar of mirth. Samantha stared at him in surprise before finding herself joining in, her own laughter mixing with his. "By Odin's beard," Ragnar gasped between laughs, "I have not felt so alive since I arrived in this strange time." Samantha wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. "I can't believe we just did that. I've never run from the police before." As their laughter subsided, Ragnar's expression grew more serious. "I am sorry, Samantha. I lost control. The berserker. It is strong within me." Samantha placed a hand on his arm. "You stopped, Ragnar. When I called out, you stopped. That's progress." Ragnar nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Perhaps, but I still feel the call of battle. How can I find place in this world when my soul yearns for the clash of steel and the song of victory?" Samantha leaned back, her mind racing. Maybe we've been going about this the wrong way. Instead of trying to suppress your warrior nature, we need to find a way to channel it. A way for you to use your skills in this time, legally and safely." Ragnar's eyes lit up with interest. "You have idea?" "Maybe," Samantha said, a plan already forming in her mind. But first we need to get you cleaned up, and then we're going to reintroduce Ragnar Ironside to the modern world, on your own terms. As they stood to leave, Ragnar felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had proven his worth today, not just as a warrior, but as a protector, and with Samantha by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges this new world might throw at him. They walked back toward Samantha's apartment, their steps light despite the day's exertions. The city that had seemed so alien to Ragnar that morning now felt different. Not home, not yet, but a battlefield he was beginning to understand. And like any true Viking, Ragnar was ready to conquer it. The morning sun filtered through the blinds of Samantha's apartment, illuminating Ragnar's imposing figure as he stood transfixed before the television. On the screen, a local news anchor was mid-report, her voice filled with a mix of awe and concern. Amateur video captured this startling scene in a downtown alley yesterday. A man, described by witnesses as looking like a Viking, single-handedly fought off two armed muggers, saving a local woman from harm. The grainy cell phone footage showed Ragnar in action, his powerful fists connecting with the muggers in a brutal display of strength. Samantha watched from the kitchen, her coffee forgotten in her hand as she gauged Ragnar's reaction. "They speak of me," Ragnar said, his voice a mix of pride and unease. "In my time, skalds would sing of such deeds, but here, it feels different." Samantha nodded, setting down her cup and joining him by the TV. "Fame in our time can be a double-edged sword, Ragnar. It brings admiration but also scrutiny and danger." As if to emphasize her point, the news anchor continued, "Police are seeking information on this mysterious vigilante. While many are hailing him as a hero, authorities warn that taking the law into one's own hands can have serious consequences." Ragnar's brow furrowed. "I did what was right. Why do your leaders not understand this?" Before Samantha could respond, her phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced at it, her eyes widening. "It's not just the news, Ragnar. You're trending on social media. People are calling you the Chicago Viking." She showed him her phone, filled with posts praising his actions and speculating about his identity. There were even hastily made memes featuring stills from the video. Ragnar stared at the small screen, overwhelmed by the rapid spread of information. This is too much. In my time, word of mouth traveled slowly. Now all of Chicago knows my face?" Samantha placed a comforting hand on his arm. "Not everyone, and most will forget in a day or two when the next big story comes along. But we need to be careful. This attention could complicate things." As they discussed the implications of Ragnar's newfound fame, across town in a dimly lit office, a group of men watched the same news report with far less admiration. "This Viking freak is bad for business," growled a heavy-set man, his fingers adorned with gaudy rings. "He's got people thinking they can stand up to us. We need to send a message." His associates nodded in agreement, their eyes cold with malice. Little did they know the storm they were about to unleash by targeting the displaced Viking warrior. Meanwhile, Samantha had sequestered herself in her study, poring over ancient texts and obscure websites. Her search for information on Viking curses had led her down a rabbit hole of mythology and folklore. Just as she was about to give up for the day, a pop-up ad caught her eye. Norse antiquities, specializing in the unusual and arcane. Intrigued, Samantha clicked the link. The website was basic, almost archaic in design, but the content was fascinating. Among listings for runestones and replica Viking artifacts was a section on mystical consultations. With a mixture of hope and skepticism, Samantha dialed the provided number. An hour later, she found herself standing before a small, cluttered shop in a less reputable part of town. The sign above the door read Olaf's Oddities in faded gold lettering. Taking a deep breath, Samantha pushed open the door, a small bell announcing her arrival. The interior was dim and dusty, crammed with shelves of curious objects. From behind a counter piled high with books emerged a small, wizened man with a shock of white hair, and piercing blue eyes. "Ah, you must be Dr. Green," he said, his voice surprisingly strong for his frail appearance. "I am Olaf. You said on the phone you had questions about Viking curses." Samantha nodded, suddenly feeling foolish. "Yes, I'm researching a case. A man who believes he's been cursed and displaced in time." Olaf's eyes twinkled with interest. "Displaced in time, you say? How fascinating. And this man, he claims to be from the Viking Age?" "Yes," Samantha replied, surprised by Olaf's lack of skepticism. "He appeared in Chicago with no explanation, speaking Old Norse, with no knowledge of the modern world." Olaf stroked his beard thoughtfully. "There are old tales of such curses. Powerful magic, wielded by those who communed with the darker forces of the Norse pantheon." He shuffled over to a bookshelf, pulling down a heavy tome bound in what looked disturbingly like human skin. As he flipped through the pages, Samantha felt hope blossoming in her chest. Could this eccentric old man really hold the key to helping Ragnar? "Ah, here we are," Olaf said, his finger tracing lines of text in a language Samantha couldn't read. "A curse of temporal displacement cast by a Völva, a seeress, scorned in love or battle. It binds the victim's spirit to a time not their own, slowly driving them mad as their warrior spirit rebels against a world it cannot understand." Samantha leaned in, her heart racing. "Is there a way to break it?" Olaf's expression grew grave. "There is, but the cost is great. The curse can only be broken by reliving the moment of its casting. Your Viking must face the Völva again, in the time and place where the curse was laid upon him." Samantha's excitement faltered. "But how is that possible? We can't send him back in time." Olaf closed the book with a heavy thud. "There are ways, Dr. Green. Ancient rituals, artifacts of great power, but such things are not to be trifled with lightly. The risks are substantial." As Olaf began to explain the dangerous and complex process that might free Ragnar from his curse, Samantha felt torn. The possibility of helping Ragnar was tantalizing, but the risks involved were terrifying. Could she really consider such a dangerous path? While Samantha grappled with this dilemma, across town, Ragnar tossed and turned in his sleep. His dreams were plagued by visions of the past, more vivid and terrifying than ever before. He stood on a blood-soaked battlefield, the cries of the dying filling his ears. Before him loomed a figure shrouded in mist, the Völva who had cursed him. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly light as she raised her staff. "You spurned my love, Ragnar Ironside," she hissed, her voice echoing with power. "Now you shall know the pain of being forever out of place, a relic in a time not your own." Ragnar tried to move, to fight, but found himself frozen in place. The Völva's staff came down and pain exploded through every fiber of his being. He felt himself being torn apart, hurled through the fabric of time itself. With a strangled cry, Ragnar jerked awake, his body drenched in sweat. The nightmare felt more real than ever, the curse's hold tightening around his very soul. He stumbled to the bathroom, splashing cold water on his face as he tried to shake off the lingering terror of the dream. Looking at his reflection in the mirror, Ragnar saw the toll the curse was taking on him. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and a haunted look had settled into his features. How long could he endure this battle against his inner demons? As dawn broke over Chicago, the city stirred to life, unaware of the forces aligning within its boundaries. In a rundown warehouse, the gang threatened by Ragnar's actions finalized their plans for revenge. "We hit him where it hurts," the leader said, tapping a photo of Samantha they had managed to obtain. "Take the girl, draw him out. Then we show this Viking what real modern warfare looks like." The gang members nodded, loading weapons and checking gear. They were confident in their plan, their superior numbers and firearms, but they had no idea of the primal force they were about to unleash. As the pieces moved into place, the stage was set for a confrontation that would shake the very foundations of Ragnar's new reality. The soft glow of candlelight flickered across Samantha's living room, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Ragnar sat cross-legged on the floor, his massive frame looking almost comical amidst the scatter of cushions Samantha had arranged. Across from him, Samantha mirrored his pose, her eyes soft as she watched the Viking warrior struggle to maintain his meditation posture. "Remember, Ragnar," she said gently. "Focus on your breath. Let the thoughts come and go like clouds passing in the sky." Ragnar's brow furrowed in concentration. "It is difficult," he rumbled. "My mind wants to wander, to plan, to fight." Samantha nodded sympathetically. "That's natural. The warrior in you is always ready for battle, but sometimes the greatest victory is finding peace within ourselves." As they continued their meditation session, Samantha couldn't help but marvel at how far they'd come. What had started as a professional curiosity had blossomed into something deeper, more profound. She found herself drawn to Ragnar's strength, his honor, his struggle to find his place in a world so foreign to him. For his part, Ragnar felt a warmth in his chest whenever he looked at Samantha. She was unlike any woman he had known in his time, fierce in her own way, but with a gentleness that soothed his troubled soul. In her presence, the constant battle against his berserker rage seemed almost manageable. As the candles burned low, they ended their meditation. Ragnar stretched, his joints popping loudly in the quiet room. "Thank you, Samantha," he said, his voice low and intimate in the dim light. "Your guidance, it means much to me." Samantha smiled, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "You're doing so well, Ragnar. I'm proud of you." Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them seemed charged with possibility. Ragnar leaned in slightly, drawn by an impulse he didn't fully understand. Samantha's breath caught in her throat, her heart racing. But before the moment could develop further, a crash echoed from outside, followed by the screech of tires. Ragnar was on his feet in an instant, his warrior instincts kicking in. "Stay here," he growled, moving towards the window. Samantha stood, her professional demeanor reasserting itself. "Ragnar, wait. We should call the police if—" Her words were cut off as the front door exploded inward. Armed men in black poured into the apartment, their weapons trained on Ragnar and Samantha. "Nobody move," shouted the lead intruder. "This can go easy or hard, it's up to you." Ragnar's eyes blazed with fury, his hands curling into fists. But before he could act, one of the men grabbed Samantha, pressing a gun to her head. "One wrong move, Viking, and the lady gets it." Samantha's eyes were wide with fear, but she managed to keep her voice steady. "Ragnar, don't. Please." The plea in her voice cut through Ragnar's rising battle rage. He stood frozen, torn between his instinct to fight and his need to keep Samantha safe. The lead intruder smirked. "Smart choice, big guy. Now the lady's coming with us. You try to follow, she dies. Understood?" Ragnar's jaw clenched, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "If you harm her—" "That's up to you," the man replied. "Stay put and maybe you'll see her again, B." With brutal efficiency, the men retreated, dragging a struggling Samantha with them. The last thing Ragnar saw was her terrified face as the door slammed shut. For a moment, Ragnar stood motionless, the shock of what had just happened washing over him. Then, like a dam breaking, the rage he had been holding back exploded through him. A roar of pure fury tore from his throat as he smashed his fist into the wall, leaving a gaping hole in the plaster. The berserker spirit, so carefully contained in recent days, surged to the forefront of Ragnar's mind. His vision tinged red, his breath coming in ragged gasps. He had to find Samantha, had to save her, had to destroy anyone who dared to harm her. Without a second thought, Ragnar charged out of the apartment and into the night. The streets of Chicago stretched before him, a labyrinth he had to conquer to find his lost companion. He ran, his powerful legs eating up the distance, his senses hyper-alert for any sign of Samantha or her captors. As he tore through the city, Ragnar left a trail of destruction in his wake. Anyone foolish enough to get in his way was shoved aside. Cars that blocked his path found their hoods dented by his fists. He was a force of nature, unstoppable in his singular focus. Meanwhile, across town, Samantha found herself thrown roughly into a dimly lit room. As her eyes adjusted to the gloom, she took in her surroundings. It appeared to be some kind of warehouse office cluttered with papers and odd trinkets. The gang leader, a heavy-set man with cruel eyes, loomed over her. "Comfortable, Doc? Hope so, 'cause you're gonna be here a while." Samantha glared up at him, fighting to keep her fear in check. "What do you want with me?" The man chuckled. "You? Nothing. It's your Viking friend we're interested in. You're just the bait." As Samantha's eyes roamed the room, searching for anything that might help her, something caught her attention. On a cluttered desk, partially hidden under some papers, was a familiar-looking book. Her breath caught as she recognized it. The same tome she had seen in Olaf's shop, bound in that disturbing leather. The gang leader noticed her gaze and smirked. "Ah, you recognize that, do you? My associate thought you might." From the shadows, a figure emerged. Samantha's eyes widened in shock as she recognized Olaf, the antiquities dealer. But gone was the kindly old man act. Now he stood tall and proud, his eyes glinting with malice. "Dr. Green," Olaf said, his voice smooth and cultured. "I do apologize for the deception, but it was necessary. You see, your Viking friend has caused quite a stir in certain mystical circles." Samantha's mind raced, trying to piece together the implications of what she was seeing. You're behind this? The curse?" Olaf smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Not originally, no, but curses can be redirected with the right knowledge. Your Ragnar is a valuable asset, one we intend to control." As Olaf began to explain their plans, Samantha felt a chill run down her spine. The true nature of the curse, its purpose, its power, it was all becoming clear, and the implications were terrifying. Across the city, Ragnar continued his relentless search. He had left a trail of terrified witnesses in his wake, his appearance and actions already spreading across social media like wildfire. The police were mobilizing, but they were woefully unprepared for the force of nature that was a Viking berserker on a mission. As he ran, Ragnar's mind was consumed by images of Samantha in danger. The thought of her suffering, afraid, possibly hurt. It drove him to greater heights of fury. He would tear this city apart stone by stone if that's what it took to find her. In the warehouse, Samantha listened with growing horror as Olaf revealed the true purpose behind Ragnar's displacement in time. It wasn't just a curse of vengeance, but a calculated move in a game of power that spanned centuries. Ragnar was meant to be a weapon, a force of destruction to be pointed at their enemies. As the full weight of the situation settled on her shoulders, Samantha felt her heart grow heavy. She had grown to care deeply for Ragnar, had seen the man behind the warrior. Now, she realized, she might be the only thing standing between him and a fate worse than death. The sound of distant sirens caught everyone's attention. The gang leader cursed, moving to the window. "Looks like your Vikings making quite a scene," he growled. "Time to prepare our welcome." As the men in the warehouse scrambled to ready their defenses, Samantha closed her eyes, sending out a silent prayer. "Be careful, Ragnar," she whispered. "Please, don't let them turn you into the monster they want you to be." The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine not just Ragnar's fate, but perhaps the course of history itself. As the berserker raged ever closer, Samantha steeled herself for what was to come, knowing that the next few hours would test them both in ways they could never have imagined. The warehouse district echoed with the sound of screeching tires and shouted orders as police cordoned off the area. They had been tracking the path of destruction left by the so-called Chicago Viking, and all signs pointed to this location. But nothing could have prepared them for what was about to unfold. Ragnar stood at the end of the street, his massive frame heaving with each breath, his eyes wild with rage. The warehouse loomed before him, a final obstacle between him and Samantha. Without hesitation, he charged forward, his roar drowning out the shouts of the police officers urging him to stop. Inside the warehouse, The gang members nervously checked their weapons. They had faced rival gangs, police raids, even the occasional vigilante. But the stories spreading about this Viking warrior had them on edge. "Remember the plan," the gang leader barked. "We take him down hard and fast. No chances." As if in answer to his words, the warehouse door exploded inward, ripped off its hinges by Ragnar's bare hands. The Viking warrior stood framed in the doorway, his eyes scanning the room until they locked onto the gang leader. "Where is she?" Ragnar growled, his voice low and dangerous. The gang leader sneered, raising his gun. "Right where you'll never find her, freak." What followed was a symphony of violence. Gunshots rang out, filling the air with smoke and the acrid smell of cordite. But Ragnar moved with inhuman speed, dodging and weaving through the hail of bullets. His fists and feet became weapons of mass destruction, sending gang members flying with each blow. "Is this the best your time can offer?" Ragnar taunted, his berserker rage lending him strength beyond mortal men. "I have faced fiercer foes on the practice fields of Kattegat." Meanwhile, in the office upstairs, Samantha worked frantically to free herself. The ropes binding her wrists had begun to fray against the sharp edge of a nearby filing cabinet. As she worked, her mind raced with the knowledge Olaf had revealed. The curse wasn't just a punishment, it was a tether, binding Ragnar's warrior spirit to forces beyond his control. If he gave in fully to the berserker rage, he would be lost forever, a weapon to be wielded by those who understood the ancient magics. With a final, desperate tug, Samantha felt the ropes give way. She scrambled to her feet, wincing at the sounds of battle from below. She had to reach Ragnar, had to make him understand before it was too late. As she reached for the door, it swung open, revealing Olaf. Gone was the kindly old man act. Now he stood tall and proud, his eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Going somewhere, Dr. Green?" he asked, his voice resonating with power. Samantha backed away, her eyes darting around for a weapon, an escape route, anything. "Who are you really?" she demanded. "What do you want with Ragnar?" Olaf smiled, but it was a cold, cruel expression. "I am the last descendant of the Völva who cast the original curse. For centuries, my family has waited for the perfect warrior to appear, one strong enough to withstand the power of the curse. Ragnar is that warrior." Samantha's mind reeled with the implications. But why? Why go through all this? Power, Dr. Green. Pure, unbridled power. With Ragnar under our control, fully consumed by the berserker rage, we can reshape the world as we see fit. Below, the battle raged on. Ragnar had decimated most of the gang, his fury growing with each passing moment. But as he fought, he felt a strange sensation building within him. The rage that had always been a part of him was changing, twisting into something darker, more primal. "Samantha," he roared, his voice echoing through the warehouse. "Where are you?" In the office, Samantha saw her chance. As Olaf monologued about his plans, she lunged for the ancient tome on the desk. If the curse's power lay within its pages, perhaps the key to breaking it did as well. Olaf's eyes widened in alarm. "No!" he shouted, lunging for her. But Samantha was quicker. She snatched up the book and darted past him, racing for the stairs. "Ragnar," she called out. "I'm here. I'm coming." The sound of her voice cut through Ragnar's battle haze. He turned, his eyes locking onto her figure as she descended the stairs. For a moment, relief washed over him. But then he saw Olaf pursuing her, his hands glowing with eldritch energy. "Samantha, look out!" Ragnar bellowed, charging towards them. What followed was a chaotic dance of magic and might. Olaf hurled bolts of energy, his ancestors' power flowing through him. Ragnar dodged and weaved, his Viking instincts serving him well against this unfamiliar threat. Samantha clutched the book to her chest, her eyes scanning the pages frantically as she sought anything that might help. "Ragnar," she called out. "The curse, it's trying to consume you. You have to fight it." Ragnar grunted as he barely avoided another magical blast. "I am fighting, Samantha. What more can I do?" Not them, Samantha replied, ducking behind a column. The rage inside you, it's part of the curse. If you give in completely, you'll be lost forever. Understanding dawned in Ragnar's eyes, quickly followed by fear, an emotion he had rarely felt in battle. He could feel it now, the creeping darkness at the edges of his consciousness, urging him to let go, to surrender to the fury that had always been his strength. Olaf laughed, a sound filled with dark triumph. It's too late, Viking. The berserker spirit is awakening. Soon you'll be nothing but a weapon for us to wield. Ragnar faltered, the weight of the curse pressing down on him. Images flashed through his mind. Battles fought, blood spilled, the exhilaration of combat that had always driven him. It would be so easy to give in, to lose himself in that familiar rage. Ragnar, no. Samantha's voice cut through the haze. She had found something in the book, a passage that glowed with an inner light. Listen to me. The curse feeds on your warrior spirit, but it's not all of who you are. Remember who you are beyond the battlefield. Ragnar closed his eyes, struggling against the rising tide of fury within him. He thought of his family, long lost to time. He thought of his people, of the quiet moments between raids when they would gather to share stories and laughter. And he thought of Samantha, of the peace he had found in her presence, the connection that transcended time itself. I am Ragnar Ironside, he growled, his voice gaining strength with each word. I am a warrior, yes, but I am also a father, a leader, a man, and I will not be controlled. With a roar of defiance, Ragnar charged at Olaf. The sorcerer's eyes widened in shock as he realized his plan was unraveling. He raised his hands, summoning every ounce of power he possessed. You fool, Olaf screamed. You could have been a god among men. Now you'll be nothing but a relic, trapped between times. Magic and might collided in a spectacular display of light and fury. Ragnar felt the curse pulling at him, trying to drag him into an abyss of endless rage. But he held fast to the memories of who he was, to the connection he had forged with Samantha and this strange new world. Samantha watched in awe as Ragnar battled not just Olaf, but the very forces of time and magic. The warehouse shook with the power of their confrontation, dust and debris raining down around them. As the battle reached its peak, Samantha realized what she had to do. The book in her hands hummed with power, responding to the energies swirling around them. With a deep breath, she began to recite the words on the page, her voice rising above the chaos. By the power of past and present, by the bonds of heart and soul, I break this curse, she cried out, her voice ringing with authority she didn't know she possessed. A blinding light filled the warehouse, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When it faded, silence fell. Ragnar stood in the center of the room, his chest heaving, his eyes clear for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The rage that had been his constant companion was still there, but muted, no longer threatening to consume him. Olaf lay crumpled on the ground, the backlash of the broken curse having drained him of his power. He looked up at Ragnar with a mixture of fear and awe. Impossible, he whispered. No one has ever broken the curse before. Ragnar stepped forward, looming over the fallen sorcerer. For a moment it seemed as if he might exact revenge for all that had been done to him. But then he felt a gentle hand on his arm. It's over, Ragnar, Samantha said softly. You won. Ragnar looked down at her, his eyes softening. No, he replied, his voice rough with emotion. We won. As the sounds of police sirens grew closer, Ragnar and Samantha shared a look of understanding. Their journey was far from over, but they had overcome the greatest challenge yet. The curse was broken, but its echoes would remain, a reminder of the battle they had fought and the bond they had forged. The warehouse echoed with the clash of steel and the crackle of arcane energy as Samantha raced against time. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the ancient tome, searching desperately for the ritual that could break Ragnar's curse. The air around her hummed with power, making her skin prickle and her hair stand on end. "Hurry, Samantha." Ragnar's voice boomed across the cavernous space. He was locked in combat with Olaf, the antiquities dealer turned sorcerer, barely managing to keep the magical assault at bay. Samantha's eyes scanned the pages frantically, her heart pounding in her chest. "I'm trying," she called back, her voice tight with tension. "This isn't exactly light reading." As she searched, memories of her time with Ragnar flashed through her mind. His confusion and wonder at the modern world, his struggles to control his berserker rage, the quiet moments of connection they had shared. She had never meant to fall for him, this man out of time, but now she couldn't imagine her life without him. That love, that connection, gave her strength. Her eyes narrowed in determination as she finally found what she was looking for. "I've got it!" she shouted, her voice ringing with triumph. Across the room, Ragnar grunted as he deflected another magical blast from Olaf. The curse within him pulsed and writhed, threatening to overwhelm his senses. He could feel it pulling at him, urging him to give in to the berserker rage that had always been his greatest strength and most terrible weakness. As he fought, memories assaulted him. The icy fjords of his homeland, the smell of salt and blood on the wind during a raid, the warmth of his children in his arms. But alongside these came newer memories. The dizzying heights of Chicago's skyscrapers, the taste of pizza, which he had decided was a food fit for the gods, the gentle touch of Samantha's hand on his arm. Past and present collided violently within him, tearing at the very fabric of his being. Ragnar roared, the sound filled with pain and defiance. "I am Ragnar Ironside," he bellowed. "I will not be conquered by magic or memory." Olaf laughed, a cold, cruel sound that sent shivers down Samantha's spine. "You fool," the sorcerer sneered. "You think this is about conquest? You understand nothing of the curse's true purpose." With a gesture, Olaf sent Ragnar flying across the room. The Viking warrior crashed into a stack of crates, wood splintering around him. Before he could rise, magical bonds materialized, pinning him in place. Samantha gasped, her hands clutching the ancient tome to her chest. "What are you talking about?" she demanded, trying to keep her voice steady. "What purpose?" Olaf turned to her, his eyes gleaming with a mix of madness and triumph. "The curse was never meant to destroy him, you simple girl. It was meant to preserve him." As Samantha and Ragnar looked on in shock, Olaf began to pace, his words spilling out in a torrent of revelation. "Do you have any idea how rare it is to find a warrior of Ragnar's caliber? His strength, his skill, his indomitable spirit, they come along once in 1,000 years. My ancestors saw his potential, knew that he could be the key to unlocking powers beyond your wildest imagination." Ragnar struggled against his bonds, his eyes burning with fury. "I am no one's key," he growled. "I am my own man." "Oh, but you are so much more," Olaf replied, his voice dripping with false sympathy. "The curse was designed to keep you in a state of suspended animation, your warrior spirit preserved until the time was right. And now, with the knowledge and technology of this era at our disposal, we can harness that spirit to reshape the world." Samantha's mind raced as she processed this information. The ritual she had found suddenly took on new meaning. It wasn't just about breaking the curse. It was about setting Ragnar truly free, allowing him to exist fully in this time without the threat of being used as a weapon. With trembling hands, she began to arrange the components needed for the ritual. Candles, herbs, symbols drawn in chalk on the warehouse floor. All the while, she kept one eye on Olaf, waiting for her chance. Ragnar watched her work, understanding dawning in his eyes. He saw the determination in her movements, the love and concern in her gaze whenever she looked his way. In that moment, he made his choice. "Samantha," he called out, his voice softer now. "Whatever happens, know that you have given me a gift greater than any I have known. A home in a time not my own." Samantha's eyes filled with tears as she met his gaze. "Don't talk like that," she said fiercely. "We're going to break this curse. You're going to be free." Olaf laughed again, the sound grating on their nerves. Free? He'll never be free. The power within him is too great, too valuable. Even if you break the curse, others will come for him. He'll spend his life running, fighting, forever out of place. Ragnar's jaw clenched as the truth of Olaf's words sank in. He looked at Samantha, saw the life they might have had together flash before his eyes. Then he looked at Olaf, at the madness and greed that drove him. In that moment, he knew what he had to do. "Samantha," he said, his voice ringing with authority, "perform the ritual, but not to break the curse. Use it to send me back." Samantha's eyes widened in shock. "What? No. Ragnar, we can figure this out. We can protect you." Ragnar shook his head, a sad smile on his face. "My brave Samantha, always fighting, even when the odds are impossible. But this is the only way. If I return to my time, the curse will have no power. Olaf and his kind will have no way to use me." Olaf snarled, realizing his plans were unraveling. "No, I won't let you." He raised his hands, dark energy crackling between his fingertips. But before he could strike, Ragnar let out a mighty roar. With a surge of strength born of desperation and love, he broke free of his magical bonds. In an instant, he was across the room, his massive hands wrapping around Olaf's throat. "Samantha!" Ragnar shouted. "Do it now!" Tears streaming down her face, Samantha began the ritual. Her voice shook as she recited the ancient words, each syllable pulsing with power. The candles flared, their flames reaching impossible heights. The symbols on the floor began to glow, bathing the warehouse in an otherworldly light. As the ritual reached its climax, magic surged through the air. Ragnar felt it pulling at him, tendrils of energy wrapping around his very soul. He looked at Samantha one last time, trying to memorize every detail of her face. "I love you," he said simply, his voice nearly lost in the maelstrom of magical energy. Samantha's heart shattered and soared at the same time. "I love you too," she whispered. With a final blinding flash of light, it was over. Where Ragnar had stood, there was nothing but empty air. Olaf lay unconscious on the ground, the backlash of the ritual having overwhelmed him. Samantha fell to her knees, the ancient tome slipping from her grasp. She had done it. She had set Ragnar free, sent him back to his own time, where he would be safe from those who would use him as a weapon. But in doing so, she had lost him forever. As the dust settled and the magical energies dissipated, Samantha allowed herself a moment to grieve. She cried for the love she had found and lost, for the future they might have had together. But even in her sorrow, she felt a glimmer of hope. Ragnar was safe. He would live out his days as the great warrior he was always meant to be, unburdened by the curse that had haunted him. And though they were separated by time, Samantha knew that their connection transcended such mortal concerns. She rose to her feet, wiping away her tears. There would be questions to answer, explanations to give. But for now, she allowed herself to remember a Viking warrior who had stumbled into her life and changed it forever. To remember Ragnar Ironside, a man out of time who had found a home in her heart. As she walked out of the warehouse, Samantha carried with her the knowledge that some loves are strong enough to echo across the ages. The warehouse erupted in a blinding flash of light, the air crackling with dissipating magical energy. As the brilliance faded, silence fell, broken only by the sound of debris settling and the ragged breathing of the room's occupants. Samantha blinked rapidly, trying to clear the spots from her vision. Her heart raced as she scanned the area, searching desperately for any sign of Ragnar. "Ragnar?" she called out, her voice trembling. "Are you here?" For a moment, there was no response, and Samantha felt her heart sink. Had the ritual truly sent him back to his own time? Was he lost to her forever? Then, from the shadows at the far end of the warehouse, came a low groan. Samantha, what has happened? Relief flooded through her as she rushed towards the sound. There, amidst a pile of broken crates, lay Ragnar. He looked disoriented, his eyes unfocused as he tried to sit up. Easy, Samantha said softly, kneeling beside him. The ritual, it was intense. How do you feel? Ragnar furrowed his brow, seeming to look inward. I feel strange, as if I am here, but also elsewhere. His eyes widened suddenly, filling with a mix of wonder and confusion. Samantha, I can see it. My homeland, my time. It's like a vision, always at the edge of my sight. Samantha helped him to his feet, her mind racing. The curse, it must have shattered differently than we expected. Instead of sending you back or trapping you here, it's left you straddling both worlds. As Ragnar steadied himself, he looked down at his hands in amazement. I can feel the strength of my younger self, the skill honed through years of battle. But I also feel this. He gestured around them at the modern warehouse. The knowledge of your time, the experiences we've shared, it's all here, within me. Before Samantha could respond, the sound of sirens filled the air, growing closer by the second. We need to go, she said urgently. Can you walk? Ragnar nodded, straightening to his full height. Lead the way, my Valkyrie, he said with a small smile, using the nickname he'd given her in lighter moments. As they made their way out of the warehouse, carefully avoiding the still unconscious form of Olaf, Samantha's mind whirled with the implications of what had happened. Ragnar was still here, still with her, but he was changed. What would this mean for their future? They emerged into the cool night air just as police cars screeched to a halt in front of the warehouse. Officers poured out, weapons drawn, shouting orders. Freeze! Hands where we can see them. Ragnar tensed, his warrior instincts kicking in, but Samantha placed a calming hand on his arm. It's okay, she murmured. Let me handle this. Stepping forward, her hands raised, Samantha called out, I'm Dr. Samantha Green. I'm a psychiatrist. This man is my patient. There's been a misunderstanding. The next few hours passed in a blur of questions, explanations, and hastily concocted half-truths. Samantha did her best to shield Ragnar from the brunt of the interrogation, weaving a story of a man suffering from a unique psychological condition that had led to the night's events. As dawn broke over the city, they were finally released, with the understanding that there would be further questions in the days to come. Exhausted and overwhelmed, they made their way back to Samantha's apartment. Once inside, Ragnar sank onto the couch, his massive frame seeming smaller somehow in the soft morning light. What now, Samantha? He asked, his voice low and uncertain. I am neither fully of this time nor of my own. Where do I belong? Samantha sat beside him, taking his hand in hers. You belong wherever you choose to, Ragnar. This change in you, it's not a curse. It's an opportunity. You have knowledge and skills from two worlds. Think of what you could do with that. Ragnar was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant as he processed her words. Then slowly, a smile spread across his face. Perhaps you are right. In my time, I was a leader, a protector of my people. Perhaps I can be that here as well. Over the next few weeks, as news of the Chicago Viking spread, Ragnar and Samantha worked tirelessly to shape his new role in the modern world. They gave carefully controlled interviews, worked with city officials, and slowly but surely began to change public perception. Ragnar's unique abilities, his warrior skills tempered by a growing understanding of modern society, made him an invaluable asset in crisis situations. He assisted in rescue operations during a major storm, using his strength and courage to save lives. He intervened in gang conflicts, his imposing presence and unexpected wisdom often diffusing situations before they turned violent. But it wasn't always easy. There were those who feared him, who saw him as a threat or a freak. Ragnar struggled with the complexities of modern law and ethics, sometimes chafing against restrictions that seemed unnecessary to his warrior mindset. Through it all, Samantha stood by his side, helping him navigate this new world while also dealing with her own conflicting emotions. She loved him. There was no doubt about that. But loving a man with one foot in the past and one in the present came with its own unique challenges. One evening, about a month after the ritual, Samantha found Ragnar standing on the balcony of her apartment, gazing out at the city skyline. She joined him, leaning against the railing. "Penny for your thoughts?" she asked softly. Ragnar turned to her, a wry smile on his face. "I still do not understand why thoughts are worth only a small copper coin," he said, before his expression grew more serious. "I was thinking of home, of the fjords and forests, of the longships and the call of battle. It is strange to miss a place I can still see in my mind's eye." Samantha nodded, understanding the complexity of his situation. "Do you regret staying?" she asked, voicing the fear that had lingered in her heart. Ragnar was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "No, there is much I miss, but there is much I would have missed here as well." He turned to her, his eyes soft. "You most of all, my Valkyrie." Their lips met in a gentle kiss, a reaffirmation of the bond that had brought them through so much. When they parted, Ragnar's expression was thoughtful. "There is a place I would like to show you," he said. "A place where I feel balanced between my two worlds." An hour later, they stood atop one of Chicago's tallest skyscrapers, the wind whipping around them as they gazed out at the glittering cityscape. Ragnar spread his arms wide, a look of pure joy on his face. "Here," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "I can see the vastness of this new world, feel its energy and potential. But I can also imagine I am atop a great mountain in my homeland, surveying the realm I am sworn to protect." Samantha watched him, her heart swelling with love and admiration for this man who had adapted so well to an impossible situation. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Ragnar turned to her, his eyes shining. "Samantha, I do not know what the future holds. This new life, it is full of challenges I never imagined facing. But I know this. Whatever comes, I want to face it with you by my side." Samantha stepped into his embrace, feeling the strength of his arms around her. "Together," she said firmly. "Whatever comes, we'll face it together." As they stood there, high above the city, Ragnar and Samantha felt the weight of their journey. The battles fought, the curse broken, the new life forged. But they also felt the promise of what was to come. A Viking warrior and a modern woman, bound by love and shared experience, ready to write the next chapter of their unlikely story. The Chicago skyline stretched out before them, a testament to human ingenuity and progress. And there, atop the skyscraper, Ragnar Ironside and Dr. Samantha Green stood ready to bridge the gap between past and present, to face whatever adventures awaited them in this strange new saga of a Viking in modern times. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink, Ragnar took Samantha's hand in his. "To new beginnings," he said softly, his voice carrying the wisdom of centuries and the hope of a future yet unwritten. Samantha squeezed his hand, her heart full. "To new beginnings," she echoed, "and to the adventures that await us." Together they turned to face the city, their city, ready to step into whatever role fate had in store for them. The Viking and his Valkyrie, guardians of Chicago, bridging the gap between worlds. Their story was far from over. In fact, it felt like it was only just beginning. Liam Odinson sat at his cluttered desk, his eyes fixed on the computer screen before him. The room was dimly lit, save for the harsh glow of the monitor that cast shadows across his face. His fingers hovered over the mouse, hesitating for a moment before he finally clicked to open the email he'd been both anticipating and dreading. "Your DNA test results are ready," the subject line read. With a deep breath, Liam opened the attachment. As the page loaded, he felt his heart begin to race. a mixture of excitement and anxiety coursing through him. He'd taken the test on a whim, a spur-of-the-moment decision after a particularly disappointing audition. Now, as he scrolled through the results, his eyes widened in disbelief. "No way," he muttered, leaning closer to the screen. "This can't be right." There, among the expected results of Northern European ancestry, was something impossible. Something that defied all logic and reason. According to the test, Liam shared genetic markers with Thor, the Norse god of thunder. "This has to be a mistake," Liam said aloud, his voice echoing in the empty apartment. He ran a hand through his disheveled blonde hair, a nervous habit he'd never quite shaken. Or a joke. Yeah, that's it. Someone's playing a prank. But as he continued to read, the details became more specific, more convincing. The report cited ancient DNA samples, archaeological findings, and even referenced confidential research papers. It all seemed far too elaborate for a simple joke. Liam's mind reeled, and suddenly, unbidden, memories of his father flooded his thoughts. Erik Odinson had been obsessed with Norse mythology, his passion bordering on mania at times. Liam could still picture his father's study, walls lined with books on Viking lore, artifacts, and hand-drawn maps of the 9 realms. "You carry the blood of gods, my boy," Erik would often say, his eyes twinkling with a mix of pride and secrecy. At the time, Liam had dismissed it as his father's overactive imagination. Now he wasn't so sure. A lump formed in Liam's throat as he remembered the long nights spent listening to his father's stories, the way Erik's voice would rise and fall as he recounted the great battles of Asgard. He could almost smell the musty odor of old books and hear the crackle of the fireplace. "Oh, Dad," Liam whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Is this what you were trying to tell me all along?" The bittersweet memories washed over him like waves. His father had passed away 5 years ago, taking with him a wealth of knowledge that Liam now desperately wished he had paid more attention to. The nostalgia was tinged with regret, a painful reminder of opportunities lost. As if responding to Liam's tumultuous emotions, the weather outside suddenly shifted. The previously clear night sky darkened as clouds rolled in with unnatural speed. A low rumble of thunder in the distance caught Liam's attention, pulling him from his reverie. He stood up and moved to the window, watching as the storm gathered strength with alarming rapidity. Lightning forked across the sky, illuminating the city in brief electric flashes. The wind picked up, howling around the corners of the building and rattling the window panes. "What the hell?" Liam muttered, pressing his forehead against the cool glass. The storm's sudden appearance felt ominous, as if nature itself was responding to the revelation of his heritage. As rain began to lash against the window, Liam felt a surge of panic rise within him. He needed answers, and he needed them now. With trembling hands, he reached for his phone, scrolling through his contacts until he found his mother's number. Liam hesitated for a moment, his thumb hovering over the call button. It was late, and he knew his mother wouldn't appreciate being woken up. But the weight of the discovery pressed down on him, demanding immediate action. Taking a deep breath, he pressed call. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Each second felt like an eternity as Liam paced back and forth, the storm outside growing more intense with each passing moment. Finally, a groggy voice answered. "Liam, is everything all right?" "Mom," Liam said, his voice cracking slightly. "I'm sorry to wake you, but I need to ask you something important." There was a pause on the other end of the line, followed by a sigh. "What is it, sweetheart?" Liam took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. "It's about Dad, about our family. I took a DNA test and the results. They're saying something impossible." Another pause, longer this time. When his mother spoke again, her voice was tight with what sounded like fear. "What do they say, Liam?" "They say that we're descendants of Thor, the actual Norse god." "Mom, what's going on? Is this some kind of mistake?" The silence that followed was deafening. Liam could hear his own heart pounding in his ears, nearly drowning out the storm raging outside. When his mother finally spoke, her words sent a chill down his spine. "Oh, Liam, I had hoped, I had prayed this day would never come." Before Liam could respond, a blinding flash of lightning struck nearby, so close that the thunder was almost instantaneous. The lights in the apartment flickered and died, plunging him into darkness. But in that moment of blackout, something extraordinary happened. Liam felt a surge of energy unlike anything he'd ever experienced before. It coursed through his veins like liquid fire, setting every nerve ending alight. His skin tingled, and for a brief, exhilarating second he felt invincible. As the lights slowly flickered back to life, Liam stared at his hands in wonder. Tiny arcs of electricity danced between his fingertips, dissipating as quickly as they appeared. The phone lay forgotten on the floor, his mother's voice calling out in tinny concern. "Liam? Liam, are you there? What's happening?" With shaking hands, Liam picked up the phone. His voice was barely a whisper as he spoke, equal parts terrified and awestruck. "Mom, I think we need to talk. There's something happening to me and I don't understand it. But I think Dad was right all along." As another peal of thunder shook the building, Liam looked out at the storm-racked city. For the first time in his life, he felt a connection to the raw power of nature, a kinship with the lightning that split the sky. Whatever was happening to him, whatever truth lay behind his father's stories and this impossible DNA test, Liam knew his life would never be the same. The morning sun struggled to penetrate the thick curtains of Liam's apartment, casting the living room in a dim, otherworldly light. Liam sat on the edge of his worn couch, hands clasped tightly in his lap, as he watched his mother, Sarah, pace back and forth. The air was heavy with unspoken truths and lingering questions. Sarah's face was etched with worry, her eyes darting nervously around the room as if expecting danger to materialize at any moment. When she finally spoke, her voice quivered with a mixture of fear and awe that sent shivers down Liam's spine. "Liam, my dear boy," she began, her words barely above a whisper. "What I'm about to tell you, it's a secret our family has guarded for generations. Your father and I, we had hoped to protect you from this burden." Liam leaned forward, his heart racing. "Mom, please, I need to know the truth." Sarah took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Our lineage, it's not just a family legend or your father's wild imagination. We are direct descendants of Thor, the god of thunder." The words hung in the air, impossibly heavy. Liam felt as if the ground had shifted beneath him. "But how?" he managed to ask, his voice hoarse. Sarah's eyes misted over with memory. Centuries ago, Thor fell in love with a mortal woman. Their union was forbidden, but love knows no boundaries, not even between realms. They had a child, and that child's blood runs in our veins. Liam's mind reeled, trying to process this information. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "We wanted to protect you," Sarah replied, her voice breaking. "This legacy, it's as much a curse as it is a blessing. There are those who would seek to destroy us, to erase all traces of the divine from this world." As if on cue, a soft glow began to emanate from the old wooden chest in the corner of the room. Sarah's eyes widened in recognition and fear. "The heirloom," she whispered. "It's responding to you." Liam approached the chest cautiously. As he lifted the lid, the glow intensified, revealing an ancient hammer pendant. Intricate runes carved into its surface pulsed with an otherworldly light, casting eerie shadows across the dimly lit room. "It was your father's," Sarah explained, her voice filled with reverence. "Passed down through generations. The runes, they're said to contain a fraction of Thor's power." As Liam reached out to touch the pendant, a spark of electricity arced between his fingers and the metal. The runes flared brightly, and suddenly, Liam felt a surge of energy course through his body. Without thinking, he grabbed the edge of the heavy oak chest. To his astonishment, he lifted it effortlessly, as if it weighed no more than a feather. The realization of what he'd done hit him like a thunderbolt, and he dropped the chest with a resounding thud. "Oh my God," Liam gasped, staring at his hands in disbelief. A mix of exhilaration and terror washed over him. "Mom, did you see that?" Sarah nodded, her face pale. "Your powers are awakening. This is what we feared." Liam flexed his fingers, still tingling with residual energy. "But this is incredible. Why would you want to hide this from me?" "Because with great power comes great danger," Sarah replied gravely. "There are forces at work in this world, Liam. Ancient enemies of the Aesir, who would stop at nothing to destroy Thor's bloodline." As if to underscore her words, a shadow passed by the window. Neither Liam nor Sarah noticed the figure lurking just out of sight, watching the unfolding scene with keen interest. The mysterious observer's eyes gleamed with malevolent curiosity. A cruel smile played across their lips as they witnessed Liam's first display of supernatural strength. This was the moment they had been waiting for, the awakening of Thor's heir. Inside the apartment, Liam was still grappling with his newfound abilities. "Mom, I need to know everything. About our family, about these powers. No more secrets." Sarah nodded reluctantly. "You're right. It's time you knew the whole truth. But Liam, you must promise me to be careful. Your life will never be the same after this." As Sarah began to delve deeper into their family's history, Liam felt a strange sensation wash over him. The room seemed to fade away, replaced by visions of a golden city floating in the stars. Massive structures of impossible architecture stretched towards the heavens, connected by a rainbow bridge that shimmered with otherworldly energy. "Asgard," Liam whispered, though he didn't know how he knew the name. The vision intensified, becoming more vivid with each passing second. Liam could hear the clash of weapons in great halls, the laughter of gods echoing across vast feasting tables. He saw faces that seemed somehow familiar. A one-eyed king on a golden throne, a dark-haired trickster with a mischievous grin, and a mighty warrior wielding a hammer that crackled with lightning. The sense of belonging that washed over Liam was overwhelming. Tears began to stream down his face as he realized that this was his heritage, his birthright. He was part of something greater than he had ever imagined. "Liam, Liam." His mother's voice seemed to come from a great distance. With a gasp, Liam's eyes flew open. He found himself lying on the couch, his mother hovering over him with a worried expression. The vision of Asgard faded, but the emotions it had stirred remained. "What happened?" Sarah asked, her voice tight with concern. Liam sat up slowly, wiping the tears from his face. "I saw it, Mom. I saw Asgard. It was beautiful. And it felt like home." Sarah's expression softened, a mix of understanding and sadness in her eyes. "The blood of the Aesir runs strong in you, my son. Stronger than I've ever seen." As Liam struggled to put his experience into words, neither he nor his mother noticed the figure that still lurked outside. The observer's eyes narrowed, a look of grim determination settling over their features. The game was afoot, and the last scion of Thor had finally revealed himself. Back inside, Liam clutched the hammer pendant, its runes still glowing faintly. "What do I do now, Mom? How do I handle this legacy?" Sarah placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "We'll face it together, Liam. But you must be prepared. The path ahead will not be easy. There will be trials, dangers, and wonders beyond your wildest dreams." As the first rays of sunlight finally broke through the curtains, Liam felt a strange mix of fear and anticipation. His old life was over, swept away by the thunderous revelation of his true heritage. Ahead lay a journey into a world of gods and monsters, of ancient powers and timeless conflicts. The sun beat down mercilessly on the film set, turning the fake Nordic village into a sweltering cauldron. Liam Odinson wiped the sweat from his brow, his Viking costume sticking uncomfortably to his skin. He'd landed a small role in a big-budget Thor movie, an irony not lost on him given his recent discoveries about his heritage. "All right, people," the director shouted through his megaphone. "Let's try this scene again. Liam, remember, you're supposed to be struggling with that hammer. It's Mjolnir, for crying out loud. It should look impossible to lift." Liam nodded, approaching the prop hammer that lay on a decorated pedestal. He wrapped his hands around the handle, prepared to give his best struggling performance. But as he began to lift, something strange happened. The hammer, which should have been light as a feather, felt impossibly heavy. "What the hell?" Liam muttered under his breath, straining with all his might. The veins in his arms bulged as he pulled, but the hammer didn't budge an inch. "Cut!" the director yelled. "Liam, what's going on? You look like you're actually having trouble lifting it." Liam let go of the handle, his arms aching. I don't know. It feels really heavy for some reason." The prop master rushed over, easily picking up the hammer. "Seems fine to me. Maybe you're just tired from the heat?" Liam nodded absently, his mind racing. Could it be possible? Was this more than just a prop? Before he could ponder further, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Excusing himself, Liam walked off set and checked the message. It was from an unknown number. "The answers you seek lie where the ancient kings sleep. Seek the mound of Uppsala." Liam's heart raced. He'd heard of Uppsala, an ancient Viking burial site in Sweden. But who sent this message? And how did they know about his quest for answers? Unbeknownst to Liam, a nondescript van parked across the street from the set was far from ordinary. Inside, government agents huddled around sophisticated surveillance equipment, their eyes fixed on monitors displaying Liam's every move. "Subject has received the message," one agent reported. "Should we intercept?" The lead agent shook her head. "Negative. We continue to observe. If he leads us to the site, we might finally get the proof we need." Back on set, Liam was lost in thought when his best friend and fellow actor Jake approached. "Hey man, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost," Jake said, concern evident in his voice. Liam hesitated. He'd known Jake for years, but the weight of his secret felt too heavy to share. Still, he needed someone to confide in. "Jake, if I tell you something crazy, do you promise to keep it between us?" Jake's eyes lit up with curiosity. "Of course, man. What's going on?" Over the next few minutes, Liam poured out his story, the DNA test, his heritage, the strange occurrences. Jake listened with wide-eyed wonder, occasionally interrupting with exclamations of disbelief. That's insane, Liam," Jake finally said when Liam finished. "But also incredibly cool. My best friend, a descendant of Thor." Liam felt a weight lift off his shoulders. "Thanks for believing me, Jake. I was worried you'd think I'd lost my mind." What Liam didn't see was the gleam of opportunity in Jake's eyes. As soon as he left Liam alone, Jake pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Hey, remember that story I pitched you last week? Well, I've got something even better. How much would you pay for proof that Norse gods are real?" The next day, Liam found himself on a plane to Sweden, the cryptic message burning a hole in his pocket. As he approached the ancient burial mounds of Uppsala, a sense of anticipation and dread filled him. The site was deserted, mist clinging to the ground in the early morning light. Liam wandered among the grassy mounds, unsure of what he was looking for. Suddenly, the ground beneath him trembled. A deafening roar split the air as a massive blue-skinned giant erupted from one of the mounds, ice crystals forming around its fists. "Son of Thor!" the frost giant bellowed. "Your kind was supposed to have been wiped out ages ago." Liam stumbled backward, terror gripping him. What are you?" The giant laughed, a sound like cracking glaciers. "I am Thrym, last of the great frost giants, and you, little godling, are my ticket to revenge against Asgard." Thrym lunged forward, his massive fist swinging towards Liam. Acting on instinct, Liam rolled to the side, feeling the rush of air as the giant's fist missed him by inches. "I don't want to fight you," Liam shouted, dodging another attack. I don't even know what's happening to me. Thrym's laughter boomed across the burial site. Then this will be even easier than I thought. As the battle raged on, Liam found himself pushed to his limits. Every muscle in his body screamed in protest as he narrowly avoided Thrym's devastating blows. But with each near miss, something stirred within him. A power he'd only glimpsed before. "Come on," Liam muttered to himself, clenching his fists. "If I really am Thor's descendant, there has to be something I can do." As if in response to his plea, storm clouds began to gather overhead. The air crackled with electricity, and Liam felt a surge of energy course through his veins. Thrym paused, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his icy features. What trickery is this? Liam stood tall, his eyes glowing with an inner light. No tricks, just heritage. With a primal roar, Liam thrust his hand towards the sky. A bolt of lightning answered his call, striking his outstretched palm. The power that flooded through him was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. Channeling the lightning, Liam directed it towards Thrym. The frost giant howled in pain and rage as the electricity coursed through his massive body. This cannot be," Thrym growled, stumbling backward. "You are but a mortal." Liam advanced, lightning dancing between his fingers. "I'm beginning to think I might be a bit more than that." With a final desperate lunge, Thrym charged at Liam. But this time Liam was ready. He met the giant's charge head-on, his lightning-charged fist connecting with Thrym's jaw in a thunderous impact. The frost giant crashed to the ground, the earth shaking with his fall. As Thrym's form began to crumble into ice and snow, he fixed Liam with a look of grudging respect. Perhaps the blood of Thor does still run strong," Thrym said, his voice fading. "Beware, son of Odin. Others will come, others far worse than I." With those ominous words, Thrym dissolved completely, leaving Liam alone in the midst of the now silent burial ground. Exhausted and battered, Liam sank to his knees. The enormity of what had just happened washed over him. He had fought a creature of myth and legend, and won. As the adrenaline faded, Liam became aware of a new sensation. The power that had awakened within him during the battle still hummed beneath his skin, no longer dormant but a living, breathing part of him. What have I gotten myself into? Liam wondered aloud, staring at his hands where traces of lightning still sparked between his fingers. Unknown to Liam, hidden cameras had captured the entire confrontation. In their surveillance van, the government agents watched the footage with a mixture of awe and fear. "Call headquarters," the lead agent ordered, her voice tense. "Tell them we have confirmation. Operation Ragnarok is a go." As storm clouds dissipated overhead, Liam slowly got to his feet. The weight of his legacy had never felt heavier, but for the first time he felt ready to bear it. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever enemies might come, Liam knew one thing for certain. He was no longer just Liam Odinson, struggling actor. The winding path through the dense Norwegian forest seemed to go on forever. Liam pushed through the underbrush, his breath coming in short gasps as he climbed the steep incline. According to his research, the reclusive Norse scholar he sought lived in a cabin at the top of this mountain. As he crested the hill, Liam saw a small, weathered cabin nestled among the pines. Smoke curled from the chimney, a sign that someone was indeed home. Gathering his courage, Liam approached and knocked on the door. After a long moment, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly man with a long white beard and piercing blue eyes. The scholar's gaze swept over Liam, and suddenly those eyes widened in shock and recognition. "By Odin's beard," the old man whispered, his voice trembling. "It cannot be." Liam shifted uncomfortably under the intense scrutiny. "Professor Eriksson? I'm Liam Odinson. I was hoping you could help me understand some things about Norse mythology and, well, my family history." Professor Eriksson continued to stare, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Odinson, you say? Come in. Come in quickly. We have much to discuss." As Liam entered the cabin, he couldn't shake the feeling that his world was about to change once again. That night, Liam tossed and turned in the small guest bed, his sleep plagued by vivid nightmares. He saw a great wolf swallowing the sun, a monstrous serpent rising from the depths of the ocean, and armies of the dead marching across a rainbow bridge. At the center of it all stood a familiar figure, himself, wielding a crackling hammer against impossible odds. Liam woke with a start, drenched in cold sweat and trembling. The images from his dream felt so real, so terrifyingly possible. Ragnarok, he whispered into the darkness, the word tasting of ash and fear on his tongue. A soft knock on the door startled him. Liam, Professor Erickson's voice called out, "Are you all right? I heard you crying out in your sleep." Liam took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing heart. I'm okay, just a nightmare." The door opened slightly, and the professor peered in, concern etched on his weathered face. "Not just a nightmare, I fear. The visions of Ragnarok have found you, haven't they?" Liam nodded, unable to find words to describe the horrors he had seen. Professor Erickson sighed heavily. "It is as I suspected. The blood of Thor runs strong in you, Liam. These visions, they are both a warning and a call to action. Ragnarok approaches, and you have a pivotal role to play." The next day, as Liam hiked through a nearby meadow, trying to clear his head, the air around him suddenly shimmered. A group of fierce warrior women on winged horses appeared, their armor gleaming in the sunlight. Liam felt his breath catch in his throat as he realized he was face to face with the legendary Valkyries. The leader, a tall woman with flowing golden hair, dismounted and approached Liam. Her piercing gaze seemed to look right through him. "Liam Odinson," she said, her voice carrying the weight of ages. "We have been watching you." Liam swallowed hard, a mixture of awe and terror coursing through him. You're Valkyries. I thought you were just myths." The Valkyrie leader smiled, though there was little warmth in it. "We are as real as the power that flows through your veins, son of Thor. We come with a warning and a choice. Ragnarok approaches, and you must decide where you stand in the coming battle." Before Liam could respond, the sound of helicopters filled the air. The peaceful meadow was suddenly swarming with black-clad government agents, weapons drawn. "Liam Odinson," a voice boomed through a megaphone. "By order of the United States government, you are to come with us immediately." The Valkyrie leader's expression hardened. "It seems your mortal authorities have taken an interest in you as well. Choose wisely, Liam Odinson. Your destiny awaits, but the path you take to reach it is yours alone." With that, the Valkyries vanished as quickly as they had appeared, leaving Liam to face the advancing agents alone. A woman in a crisp suit stepped forward, her badge identifying her as Agent Carter. "Mr. Odinson, we've been monitoring your activities. Your abilities have come to our attention. We need you to come with us for questioning and possibly containment." Liam felt a surge of anger and fear. "Containment? I'm not a threat. I'm just trying to understand what's happening to me." Agent Carter's expression softened slightly. "We understand this is confusing for you, but you have to see it from our perspective. You possess powers we don't fully understand. You could be a danger to yourself and others." Liam's mind raced. He thought of his old life, his struggling acting career, his small apartment, his normal existence. Then he remembered the visions of Ragnarok, the words of the Valkyries, the legacy that ran through his blood. "I'm sorry," Liam said, his voice firm, "but I can't go with you. There's too much at stake." Agent Carter's face hardened. "Then you leave us no choice. Take him." As the agents rushed forward, Liam felt the now familiar surge of power within him. Lightning crackled between his fingers as he prepared to defend himself. Suddenly, a voice cut through the chaos. "Stop." Liam turned to see his mother, Sarah, running towards him. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Sarah placed herself between Liam and the agents. "You can't have my son. You don't understand what you're dealing with." Agent Carter raised her hand, signaling her team to hold. "Ma'am, please step aside. This doesn't concern you." Sarah's eyes flashed with a fire Liam had never seen before. "It concerns me more than you could possibly know. Liam, run. Find Professor Erickson. He'll know what to do next. Mom, I can't leave you." Before Liam could finish, a new threat emerged. Dark figures materialized from the shadows, their eyes glowing with an eerie green light. "Loki's followers," Sarah gasped. "Liam, go now!" The shadow creatures lunged forward. Sarah raised her hands, and to Liam's shock, a burst of light erupted from her palms, pushing the attackers back. "Mom?" Liam gasped, stunned by this revelation of his mother's powers. Sarah turned to him, her eyes filled with love and determination. "There's so much I never told you, my son, but now you must forge your own path. Remember who you are, Liam Odinson. Remember your legacy." As the shadow creatures regrouped for another attack, Sarah pushed Liam away. "Go, live, and fulfill your destiny." Torn between staying to fight and obeying his mother's wishes, Liam made the hardest decision of his life. With tears in his eyes, he turned and ran, the sounds of battle fading behind him. As he reached the edge of the forest, Liam heard his mother's voice one last time, carried on the wind like a whisper. "May the strength of Thor and the wisdom of Odin guide you, my beloved son. You are the hope of both realms." With those words echoing in his heart, Liam plunged into the forest, leaving behind the life he had known and embracing the uncertain future that lay ahead. The weight of his legacy had never felt heavier, but for the first time he felt ready to bear it. The clash of metal on metal echoed through the hidden training grounds as Liam parried another lightning-fast attack from his sparring partner. Sweat dripped from his brow, his muscles screaming in protest, but a fierce grin played across his face. "Again!" shouted Astrid, the battle-hardened leader of the secret society of Thor's descendants. Her steel-gray hair was pulled back in a tight braid, her eyes sharp as she observed Liam's form. Liam raised his practice hammer once more, facing off against Eric, another young descendant. The two circled each other warily before Eric lunged forward with a powerful overhead strike. Liam sidestepped, using Eric's momentum against him and landing a solid blow to his opponent's side. "Better," Astrid called out. "You're learning to think like a warrior, not just an actor playing one." As the sparring session ended, Liam collapsed onto a nearby bench, every inch of his body aching. Yet despite the physical toll, he felt more alive than ever before. "You're improving quickly," said a quiet voice beside him. Liam turned to see Freya, a lithe, dark-haired woman who had been watching the training session. There was something about her that had always set Liam on edge, though he couldn't quite put his finger on why. "Thanks," Liam replied, taking a long drink of water. "Though I still have a lot to learn." Freya's lips curled into a small smile. "Don't we all?" She hesitated for a moment before continuing. "Listen, Liam, there's something I need to tell you, something I probably should have said when you first arrived." Liam raised an eyebrow, curious. "What is it?" Freya took a deep breath. "I'm not exactly like the rest of you. My lineage, it's complicated." "What do you mean?" "I'm a descendant of Loki." The words hung in the air between them. Liam felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Surprise, anger, fear, and oddly, a hint of relief at finally understanding the strange tension he'd felt around Freya. "You're what?" Liam sputtered. "But how? Why are you here?" Freya's eyes flashed with a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. "Because not all of Loki's children choose to follow in his chaotic footsteps. Some of us want to make amends for the harm our ancestor caused. I've been working with this society for years, trying to prove that I can be trusted." Liam stared at her, unsure how to respond. Part of him wanted to lash out, to blame her for the attack that had taken his mother. But as he looked into Freya's eyes, he saw genuine sincerity and a loneliness he recognized all too well. I need some time to process this," Liam said finally. Freya nodded. "I understand. But I hope that in time, you'll see that we're not so different, you and I." We're both trying to find our place in a legacy we didn't choose. As Freya walked away, Liam felt the first stirrings of an unexpected kinship. Perhaps there was more to this descendant of Loki than met the eye. Weeks passed, and Liam found himself growing closer to Freya. Their shared experiences as outsiders trying to navigate their complicated heritages formed the basis of an unlikely friendship. They spent long evenings discussing their fears, hopes, and the weight of their ancestral legacies. One night, as they sat atop a hill overlooking the secret society's compound, Freya turned to Liam with a serious expression. "There's something I think you need to see," she said. "Something that might help you understand your place in all of this." "What do you mean?" Liam asked, intrigued. Freya stood, offering her hand to Liam. "Do you trust me?" Liam hesitated for just a moment before taking her hand. "I do." Freya's eyes glimmered with an otherworldly light. "Then hold on tight." Suddenly, the world around them exploded into a kaleidoscope of colors. Liam felt as if he was being stretched and compressed all at once, hurtling through space at impossible speeds. When the sensation finally stopped, he found himself standing on a shimmering rainbow-hued bridge that stretched out across the stars. "The Bifrost," Liam whispered in awe, his legs shaky beneath him. "But how?" Freya smiled, a hint of mischief in her eyes. "A little trick passed down through my family. Not all of Loki's gifts were for chaos." As they walked along the Bifrost, Liam felt his breath catch in his throat. The universe spread out before him in all its infinite glory, more beautiful and terrifying than he had ever imagined. He could feel the power of the cosmos thrumming through the bridge, through his very being. "This is incredible," Liam said, his voice filled with wonder. "I never truly believed. I mean, I knew intellectually, but to actually see it, it changes you," Freya finished for him. "Once you've walked the paths between worlds, you can never see things quite the same way again." As they reached the end of the Bifrost, Liam's heart sank. Before them lay the ruins of a once great city, golden spires toppled, grand halls reduced to rubble. "Asgard," Liam breathed, tears welling up in his eyes. "What happened?" Freya's voice was solemn. "Ragnarok, the last great battle. It nearly destroyed everything." Liam walked among the ruins, his hand trailing over fallen columns and shattered statues. He could almost hear the echoes of battles long past, the laughter and songs of the Aesir in happier times. A profound sense of loss and longing filled him. "This is why we train," Freya said softly. "Why we prepare. The cycle of Ragnarok is eternal, Liam. It will come again, and we must be ready." Liam nodded, a new determination settling over him. "We will be. We'll restore Asgard to its former glory. I swear it." As they prepared to return to Earth, neither Liam nor Freya noticed the shadowy figure watching them from the ruins, a cruel smile playing across its face. Back at the compound, Liam threw himself into his training with renewed vigor. His newfound sense of purpose and belonging drove him to push himself harder than ever before. The other descendants noticed the change in him, and many began to look to Liam as a natural leader. However, not everyone was pleased with Liam's rising status within the society. Eric, one of the older members, had always resented the attention given to Liam. As Liam and Freya grew closer, Eric's jealousy and suspicion festered. One evening, as the society gathered for a council meeting, Eric stood up, his face twisted with anger. "Brothers and sisters," he began, his voice ringing out across the hall. "We have a traitor in our midst." A murmur of confusion rippled through the crowd. Liam felt a sense of unease settling in his stomach. Eric pointed an accusing finger at Freya. "This woman is no ally of Thor. She is a descendant of Loki, the very trickster who has sought our destruction time and time again." Gasps and angry shouts filled the air. Liam jumped to his feet, placing himself between Freya and the increasingly hostile crowd. "It's true that Freya is descended from Loki," Liam said, trying to calm the situation. "But she has proven herself a loyal friend and ally. She's one of us." Eric's eyes narrowed. "And how do we know she hasn't bewitched you, Odinson?" How do we know this isn't all part of some grand deception? The crowd's anger seemed to be shifting towards Liam now. He could see doubt and suspicion in the eyes of people he had come to consider friends. Astrid stepped forward, her voice cutting through the chaos. Enough. Liam, Freya, is what Eric says true? Freya stepped out from behind Liam, her head held high. It is true that I am descended from Loki, but everything I've done here has been in service of our shared goal, to protect the realms and prevent Ragnarok. The hall erupted into argument. Accusations flew back and forth, years of built-up mistrust and fear bubbling to the surface. Liam watched in horror as the unity of the society crumbled before his eyes. In the midst of the chaos, Eirik slipped away unnoticed. By the time order was restored and Astrid had called for a period of reflection, the damage was done. The sense of belonging Liam had found among these descendants of Thor lay shattered at his feet. As the rest of the society dispersed, whispering and casting suspicious glances, Liam found himself alone with Freya once more. "I'm so sorry," Freya said, her voice thick with emotion. "I never meant for this to happen. Perhaps it would be better if I left." Liam shook his head firmly. "No. We're in this together now. Whatever comes next, we face it side by side." With a shared nod of determination, Liam and Freya turned to face the uncertain future. The storm was gathering, and they would need every ally they could find to weather what was coming. As night fell over the compound, Liam stood alone atop the hill where he and Freya had begun their journey to Asgard. The memory of those glorious ruins filled his mind, and he felt tears streaming down his face once more. "I swear," he whispered to the stars, his voice choked with emotion but filled with resolve. "I will restore Asgard to its former glory, whatever it takes, whatever the cost. This, I vow." Little did Liam know that his vow had been heard, not just by the uncaring stars, but by forces both light and dark that were now turning their full attention to the last scion of Thor. The ancient stone chamber echoed with the sound of Liam's labored breathing. Sweat poured down his face, mingling with the blood from countless small cuts and bruises that covered his body. Before him stood an imposing magical barrier, crackling with energy that seemed to mock his mortal limitations. "Come on, Odinson," he muttered to himself, gritting his teeth as he pushed against the barrier once more. "You can do this." This was the first of 3 divine trials, tests designed to push the God-born to their absolute limits. Liam had been warned that many had failed, their bodies and spirits broken by the sheer intensity of the challenges. But he had no choice. To claim his birthright and stand a chance against the coming storm, he needed to prove his worth. As Liam strained against the barrier, he felt something deep within him begin to stir. A power he had only glimpsed before, raw and primal, surged through his veins. With a roar that shook the very foundations of the chamber, Liam channeled every ounce of his strength and will into breaking through. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like shattering glass, the barrier exploded outward. Liam stumbled forward, gasping for air, his muscles screaming in protest. "Well done, son of Thor," a disembodied voice echoed through the chamber. "But this is only the beginning. 2 more trials await, each more challenging than the last. Are you prepared to continue?" Liam straightened up, his eyes blazing with determination. "I am." The world around him shifted, and Liam found himself standing on a narrow bridge spanning an impossibly vast ocean. The water below churned and roiled, as if something massive was moving beneath the surface. Suddenly, an enormous, serpentine head burst from the waves, its eyes glowing with ancient malevolence. Liam's heart raced as he realized he was face to face with Jormungandr, the world serpent. "So," the creature hissed, its voice reverberating through Liam's very bones. "This is the heir of Thor? You seem smaller than I expected." Liam swallowed hard, fighting to keep his voice steady. "I am Liam Odinson, and I've come to prove my worth." The world serpent's laughter was like the grinding of tectonic plates. "Prove your worth? Little godling, Your ancestor could barely hold his own against me. What hope do you have?" As the serpent's massive coils began to wrap around the bridge, Liam felt a creeping doubt seep into his mind. Was he truly worthy of this legacy? How could he, a mere mortal, hope to stand against such primordial power? I don't know," Liam admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "But I have to try." Jormungandr's eyes narrowed. "Then try, son of Thor. Show me the power that flows through your veins." What followed was a battle that would have been the stuff of legend in ages past. Liam dodged and weaved, calling upon every ounce of training and newfound power he possessed. Lightning crackled from his fingertips, striking the world serpent's scales with thunderous impact. But for every blow Liam landed, Jormungandr seemed to grow stronger. As the battle raged on, Liam found himself being pushed back, his confidence wavering with each step. "Is this all you have to offer?" the world serpent taunted. "Perhaps I was mistaken. Perhaps there is no worthy heir of Thor left in this realm." Those words struck Liam like a physical blow. He stumbled, nearly falling from the bridge into the churning waters below. As he clung to the edge, his arms trembling with exhaustion, Liam felt the full weight of his doubts crashing down upon him. "Maybe you're right," he gasped, tears of frustration stinging his eyes. "Maybe I'm not worthy." Just as Liam was about to let go, a memory flashed through his mind. It was Astrid, the leader of the secret society, her eyes filled with a fierce pride as she watched him train. "You have the heart of a true warrior, Liam," she had told him. "Never forget that." With a surge of renewed determination, Liam pulled himself back onto the bridge. He stood tall, facing the world serpent with newfound resolve. "I may not be Thor," Liam declared, his voice ringing with power, "but I am his heir and I will not falter." With a battle cry that shook the very heavens, Liam unleashed a storm of lightning unlike anything he had ever managed before. The world serpent roared in pain and surprise, its massive body thrashing in the waves. As the light faded, Liam found himself alone on the bridge once more. Jormungandr had vanished beneath the waves, leaving only the echo of its voice behind. Perhaps there is hope for you yet, son of Thor." Exhausted but triumphant, Liam sank to his knees. He had passed the second trial, but at what cost? The doubts that had plagued him during the battle still lingered, a shadow on his newfound confidence. As the world shifted once more, Liam found himself back at the secret society's compound. The familiar surroundings were a balm to his battered spirit, but he knew his trials were not yet complete. "Liam!" a voice called out. He turned to see Sigrid, a fellow descendant of Thor, running towards him. Her golden hair gleamed in the sunlight, and her smile was radiant with relief and something more. Without thinking, Liam swept Sigrid into his arms, holding her close. The connection between them had been growing for weeks, a spark of something that could be so much more if given the chance. "I was so worried," Sigrid whispered, her hand gently touching the cuts and bruises on Liam's face. "When you disappeared for the trials, I feared—" "I'm all right," Liam assured her, though his voice betrayed his exhaustion. "It was intense, but I made it through." Sigrid's eyes shone with admiration and affection. "I knew you would. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for, Liam Odinson." For a moment, Liam allowed himself to get lost in Sigrid's gaze. Here, in her arms, the weight of his destiny felt a little lighter, but as he leaned in to kiss her, a sharp pain lanced through his head, accompanied by a vision of the destruction he had witnessed in Asgard. Liam pulled away, his heart heavy. "Sigrid, we can't. Not now. There's too much at stake." The hurt in Sigrid's eyes was like a knife to Liam's heart. "I understand," she said softly, though her voice trembled slightly. "Our destiny comes first. Always." As Sigrid walked away, Liam felt as if a piece of himself was going with her, but he knew it was necessary. The path ahead was too dangerous, too uncertain. He couldn't risk letting his feelings cloud his judgment or put Sigrid in danger. With a heavy heart, Liam turned his attention to preparing for the final trial. He threw himself into training with a fervor that bordered on obsession, pushing his body and newfound powers to their absolute limits. Days blurred into weeks, and Liam grew stronger with each passing moment. But the constant strain began to take its toll. His sleep was plagued by nightmares of failure, of watching helplessly as everything he cared about was destroyed. One night, as Liam tossed and turned in his bed, a dark thought crept into his mind. What if he simply walked away from it all? He could disappear, start a new life far from the burden of his heritage. For one terrible moment, Liam seriously considered it. The temptation to flee, to escape the crushing weight of expectation and destiny, was almost overwhelming. It was in this moment of weakness that the final trial began. The world around Liam dissolved, replaced by a swirling vortex of chaos and destruction. He found himself standing at the heart of Ragnarok itself, witnessing the fall of gods and the unraveling of reality. "This is the fate that awaits if you fail," a voice boomed from everywhere and nowhere. "This is the consequence of your weakness." Liam watched in horror as everyone he cared about was consumed by the maelstrom. Sigrid, Astrid, his fellow descendants, even his long-lost mother, all of them cried out for help, reaching for him as they were torn apart. "No!" Liam screamed, falling to his knees. "Please, I'll do anything. Just make it stop." "Will you?" the voice asked, suddenly gentle. "Will you stand against the tide of fate itself? Will you bear the weight of worlds upon your shoulders, knowing that a single moment of doubt could bring about their destruction?" Liam closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. He thought of all he had been through, all he had learned. He thought of the legacy he carried, not just of Thor, but of every person who had ever stood against darkness and chaos. Slowly, Liam rose to his feet. He opened his eyes, and they blazed with the power of the storm itself. "I will," he declared, his voice ringing with unshakable resolve. "I am Liam Odinson, heir of Thor, protector of realms, and I will not falter." Lightning erupted from Liam's body, pushing back the chaos of Ragnarok. With each thunderous heartbeat, the vortex of destruction receded, replaced by a vision of hope and renewal. As the last vestiges of the trial faded away, Liam found himself standing once more in the ancient stone chamber where his journey had begun. But he was not the same person who had entered. The trials had forged him anew, burning away doubt and weakness, leaving behind a warrior worthy of his divine heritage. "You have passed the trials, Liam Odinson," the disembodied voice announced, filled with approval and perhaps a hint of pride. "You have proven yourself worthy of the power that flows through your veins. But remember, young Godborn, that with great power comes great responsibility. The true test lies ahead." As Liam stepped out of the chamber, his eyes still crackling with barely contained power, he knew that his journey was far from over. But for the first time since discovering his heritage, he felt truly ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The icy wind howled across the desolate landscape of Jotunheim, carrying with it the promise of danger and the weight of ages. Liam Odinson stood at the head of a small band of warriors, his eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of movement. The raid into the realm of the frost giants had been his idea, a bold attempt to secure an artifact that could turn the tide in the coming battles. "Are you sure about this, Liam?" whispered Sigrid, her breath visible in the frigid air. "We're deep in enemy territory." Liam nodded, his jaw set with determination. "We have to try. The casket of ancient winters could be the key to preventing Ragnarok." As they crept forward, the sounds of their footsteps muffled by the snow, Liam's heart pounded with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This was what he had trained for, what all those trials had prepared him to face. Yet a small voice in the back of his mind whispered doubts, reminding him of the cost of failure. Suddenly, a massive shape loomed out of the swirling snow, a frost giant sentry, easily twice the height of a man, its blue skin etched with intricate patterns of ice. "Now!" Liam shouted, raising Mjolnir high. Lightning arced from the hammer, striking the giant and illuminating the battlefield in a brilliant flash. The raid had begun in earnest. What followed was a chaotic melee of clashing steel and shattering ice. Liam's warriors fought bravely, their weapons enchanted to withstand the bitter cold of Jotunheim. But for every giant they felled, two more seemed to take its place. As Liam battled his way through the frost giant defenses, he caught glimpses of the toll the fight was taking on his followers. Brave men and women fell, their bodies quickly covered by the ever-present snow. Each loss felt like a personal failure, a weight that settled heavily on Liam's shoulders. "We have to press on," he called out, trying to rally his remaining forces. "We're almost there." Finally, they broke through to the inner sanctum of the frost giant stronghold. There, seated upon a throne of ice, was the frost giant king himself, Utgard Loki. The ancient being's red eyes gleamed with malevolent intelligence as he regarded the intruders. "So," Utgard Loki's voice rumbled like an avalanche, "the spawn of Thor dares to enter my realm. Have you come to meet your doom, little godling?" Liam stepped forward, Mjolnir crackling with barely contained power. "I've come for the casket of ancient winters. Hand it over and we'll leave in peace." The frost giant king's laughter shook icicles from the ceiling. "Peace? There can be no peace between our kinds, son of Thor. Your father saw to that long ago." With a gesture from Utgard Loki, the remaining frost giants surged forward. Liam found himself locked in combat with the king himself, their clash sending shockwaves through the icy fortress. As the battle raged on, Liam felt a dark power rising within him. It was intoxicating, whispering promises of easy victory if he would only let go of his restraint. For a moment, Liam was tempted to give in, to unleash the full fury of his godly heritage upon his enemies. "Yes," Utgard Loki hissed, sensing Liam's inner struggle. "Show me the true face of Asgard's heir. Prove that you are no better than those who came before you." Those words snapped Liam back to reality. He realized with a start that he was on the verge of becoming the very thing he had sworn to fight against. With a supreme effort of will, Liam reined in the darker aspects of his power, focusing instead on the purer aspects of his strength. "I am not my father," Liam declared, his voice ringing with conviction. "And I will not repeat the mistakes of the past." The tide of battle began to turn, but the cost was high. Liam watched in anguish as more of his loyal followers fell to the frost giant's relentless assault. Each loss felt like a personal failure, a reminder of the weight of leadership he now bore. As Liam battled on, feeling the strain of prolonged combat, an unexpected voice called out from the shadows of the throne room. "Odinson, catch!" Liam turned just in time to see a glowing blue object hurtling through the air towards him. He caught it instinctively, feeling a surge of cold power course through his body. The casket of ancient winters. Standing in the doorway was a figure Liam never expected to see in Jotunheim. Freya, the descendant of Loki he had befriended back at the compound. "Freya?" Liam gasped, barely dodging a blow from Utgard Loki. "What are you doing here?" Freya's lips curled into a mischievous smile. "Saving your bacon, apparently. Now let's get out of here." With the casket in their possession and Freya's unexpected aid, the tide of battle shifted dramatically. But as they fought their way back towards the exit, Liam realized with growing dread that they were still hopelessly outnumbered. "We'll never make it to the Bifrost site," Sigrid shouted over the din of battle. "There are too many of them." Liam looked at the casket in his hands, then at the dwindling number of his followers. A plan began to form in his mind, but the cost would be unimaginable. "Everyone, fall back to me," Liam commanded. As his remaining warriors formed a tight circle around him, he turned to Freya. "Can you get us out of here? Back to Midgard?" Freya's eyes widened as she realized what Liam was planning. "I can, but Liam, if you use the casket like that, the damage to Jotunheim will be catastrophic," Liam finished grimly. "I know, but it's the only way to ensure our escape and prevent the frost giants from following." The weight of the decision pressed down on Liam like a physical force. He thought of all the innocents in Jotunheim who would suffer for his actions. But then he looked at the faces of his loyal followers, at Sigrid and Freya, and knew he had no choice. "Do it," Liam said, his voice heavy with resolve. As Freya began the spell to transport them back to Midgard, Liam raised the casket of ancient winters high. He channeled every ounce of his power into the artifact, feeling it resonate with the very fabric of Jotunheim itself. "I'm sorry," Liam whispered, a single tear freezing on his cheek. The world exploded into a maelstrom of ice and snow. The last thing Liam saw before Freya's magic whisked them away was Utgard Loki's face, contorted in a mixture of rage and disbelief. They materialized on the grounds of the secret society's compound, the sudden warmth of Midgard a shock to their systems. As his followers celebrated their narrow escape, Liam stood apart, the weight of what he had done settling over him like a shroud. Sigrid approached him cautiously. "Liam, are you all right?" Liam turned to her, his eyes haunted. "We got what we came for, but the cost. Sigrid, what I did to Jotunheim." "You did what you had to do," Sigrid said softly, placing a hand on his arm. "We all knew the risks when we followed you into battle." But Liam knew that the devastation he had unleashed upon Jotunheim would haunt him for years to come. He had won the battle, secured a powerful artifact that could help in the fight against Ragnarok. But in doing so, he feared he had taken the first step down a dark path. As the adrenaline of battle faded, Liam looked at the faces of his remaining followers. So many had fallen, their sacrifices allowing the rest to return home. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier. "Get some rest," Liam told his weary band. "Tomorrow we begin planning our next move." As the others dispersed, Freya lingered behind. "For what it's worth," she said quietly, "I think you made the right choice. A terrible one, yes, but the right one." Liam nodded, grateful for her understanding but unable to shake the guilt that gnawed at him. He looked down at the casket of ancient winters, still clutched in his hands. Its power had come at a terrible price, one that he would have to live with for the rest of his days. As night fell over the compound, Liam stood alone, gazing up at the stars. He thought of Jotunheim, of the destruction he had wrought, and of the battles yet to come. The raid into the realm of the frost giants had changed him, forced him to confront the darker aspects of his power and the true cost of leadership. "Whatever comes next," Liam vowed to the uncaring sky, "I will find a way to make this right, to be the leader they deserve, and to use this power for good." But even as he made this promise, Liam couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows of Jotunheim would follow him for a long time to come. The golden halls of New Asgard, once filled with laughter and song, now echoed with the grim preparations for war. Liam Odinson stood before the assembled Asgardians, his eyes blazing with determination and the weight of destiny heavy upon his shoulders. The time had come for their final stand against Loki's forces. "Sons and daughters of Asgard," Liam's voice boomed, carrying with it the unmistakable power of thunder. "We stand at the twilight of our age. Loki's armies march upon the 9 realms, intent on bringing about Ragnarok itself." A murmur of fear rippled through the crowd, but Liam raised his hand, silencing them. "But we are not without hope," he continued, his words igniting a spark in the hearts of his people. "In our veins runs the blood of gods and heroes. We are the last line of defense against the coming darkness. Will you stand with me?" The response was deafening. Warriors raised their weapons, their battle cries shaking the very foundations of New Asgard. Liam felt a surge of pride and determination as he looked upon the faces of those willing to lay down their lives for the 9 realms. As the Asgardians prepared for battle, Liam sought out his closest allies. Sigrid, her golden hair braided for war, approached him with a grim smile. "So this is it," she said softly. "The battle we've been preparing for all this time." Liam nodded, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "Whatever happens, Sigrid, know that I—" But before he could finish, the sky above New Asgard tore open. Loki's forces poured through the breach, a nightmarish army of frost giants, dark elves, and creatures of shadow. "To arms!" Liam roared, raising Mjolnir high. Lightning arced from the hammer, striking the first wave of invaders. The battle that followed was unlike anything the Nine Realms had ever seen. Across Yggdrasil, from the fiery plains of Muspelheim to the mist-shrouded forests of Vanaheim, war raged. And at the center of it all was Liam, a living storm of lightning and fury. In Alfheim, Liam fought alongside the Light Elves, his hammer striking down frost giants that towered over the battlefield. On Nidavellir, he rallied the dwarven forge masters, their enchanted weapons turning the tide against Loki's shadowy minions. But for every victory there was a cost. Liam watched in horror as familiar faces fell around him. Eric, the young warrior who had been one of his first friends in New Asgard, was cut down by a dark elf's blade. Astrid, the battle-hardened leader who had guided Liam in his early days, sacrificed herself to close a portal that threatened to overwhelm their forces. Each loss felt like a physical blow, driving Liam to fight harder, to push himself beyond his limits. But even as he battled on, a creeping despair began to take hold in his heart. In a lull between skirmishes, Liam found himself standing alone on a cliff overlooking the carnage below. The weight of leadership, the countless lives lost, pressed down upon him like a physical force. Was it all for nothing? He whispered, his voice choked with emotion. Have I led them all to their deaths? For a moment, Liam felt the darkness that had tempted him before rising up once more. It would be so easy to give in, to unleash his full power without restraint, regardless of the consequences. As Liam teetered on the brink of despair, a warm light suddenly enveloped him. He blinked, finding himself no longer on the battlefield, but in a realm of pure, golden energy. "My son," a familiar voice called out. Liam turned, his heart leaping in his chest. There, standing before him, was Thor, his father, the god of thunder in all his glory. "Father?" Liam gasped, scarcely able to believe his eyes. "How is this real?" Thor smiled, placing a hand on Liam's shoulder. The touch felt solid, reassuring. "As real as the power that flows through your veins, my boy. I've been watching you, Liam. You've faced trials that would break lesser men." Liam felt tears welling up in his eyes. "I don't know if I can do this, Father. The cost, it's too high." "The cost of failure would be higher still," Thor said gently. "You carry not just my legacy, Liam, but the hopes of all the realms. You are stronger than you know." As Thor began to fade, Liam reached out desperately. "Wait, I need your help." "You have all the help you need," Thor's voice echoed. "It's been within you all along. Remember who you are, Liam Odinson. Remember what you fight for." The vision faded, and Liam found himself back on the battlefield. But something had changed. The despair that had threatened to consume him was gone, replaced by an unshakable resolve. "For Asgard," Liam roared, his voice carrying across the battlefield. "For the Nine Realms." Renewed by his father's words, Liam threw himself back into the fray. His example inspired those around him, rallying the forces of Asgard for one final push. As the battle raged on, Liam caught sight of a familiar figure at the heart of the enemy forces. Loki, the god of mischief, orchestrating the chaos with a cruel smile on his face. "Loki," Liam called out, his voice cutting through the din of battle. "Face me, trickster. Let's end this, once and for all." Loki turned, his eyes gleaming with malevolent amusement. "Ah, the little Odinson. Come to follow in Daddy's footsteps, have you?" The two demigods clashed in a cataclysmic duel that shook the very foundations of Yggdrasil. Liam's lightning met Loki's sorcery in explosions of raw power. The fate of the Nine Realms hung in the balance with every exchange. "Why are you doing this?" Liam demanded as they grappled. "Why bring about Ragnarok?" Loki's face twisted with a mixture of rage and pain. "Because it's inevitable. The cycle of destruction and rebirth cannot be stopped. I'm merely hastening the inevitable." "No!" Liam shouted, pushing back against Loki's assault. We make our own fate. The cycle can be broken. Their battle carried them across the realms. In Muspelheim, they traded blows amidst rivers of lava. On the branches of Yggdrasil itself, they danced a deadly duel between worlds. As their fight reached its climax, Liam felt the power of the storm surging within him stronger than ever before. He realized that this was what his father had meant. The strength he needed had been within him all along. With a mighty cry, Liam channeled every ounce of his power into Mjolnir. The hammer struck Loki with the force of 1,000 thunderbolts, sending the god of mischief crashing to the ground. Loki lay there, defeated but still defiant. "Go on then," he spat. "Finish it. Prove that you're no better than those who came before you." Liam stood over his fallen foe, Mjolnir raised high. For a moment he was tempted to end it all, to ensure that Loki could never threaten the realms again. But then he remembered his father's words, the lessons he had learned on his journey. With a supreme effort of will, Liam lowered the hammer. "No," he said firmly. "This ends now, Loki. But not with your death. You'll face justice for your crimes, and perhaps you'll find redemption." As Asgardian forces moved in to secure Loki, Liam looked out over the battlefield. The fighting was dying down, the enemy forces in disarray without their leader. Sigrid approached, battered but alive. "Is it over?" she asked, her voice filled with cautious hope. Liam nodded, feeling the weight of the past days settling over him. The battle is won, but the work of rebuilding, that's only just beginning. As the sun began to rise over the 9 realms, Liam Odinson stood tall, Mjolnir at his side. He had faced his greatest challenge, confronted his deepest fears, and emerged victorious. The twilight of the gods had come and gone, and a new day was dawning. But even as he allowed himself a moment of triumph, Liam knew that the road ahead would not be easy. There were wounds to heal, realms to rebuild, and a hard-won peace to maintain. "Whatever comes next," Liam vowed, his voice carrying the quiet strength of a leader tested by fire, "we'll face it together. For Asgard, for the 9 realms, for the future we've fought so hard to secure." And with those words, Liam Odinson, heir of Thor and protector of the realms, turned to face the dawning of a new age. The dust of battle had finally settled, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Liam Odinson stood atop a hill overlooking what remained of New Asgard, his heart heavy with the weight of victory. The golden spires that once reached proudly towards the sky now lay in ruins, shattered remnants of their former glory scattered across the landscape. Mjolnir hung limply at his side, its surface still crackling with residual energy from the cataclysmic battle. Liam's eyes swept over the devastation, his victory feeling hollow as he truly comprehended the cost of their triumph. "My lord," a voice called out, breaking through Liam's somber reverie. He turned to see Bjorn, one of the few remaining Asgardian elders, approaching with a group of survivors. Their faces were a mixture of hope and trepidation, their eyes fixed upon Liam as if he held all the answers to their uncertain future. "What do we do now?" Bjorn asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Our home. It's gone." Liam felt the weight of their expectations settle upon his shoulders. These people had fought beside him, had sacrificed everything for the hope of a better tomorrow. Now, they looked to him for guidance, for a path forward through the ruins of their world. Taking a deep breath, Liam straightened his posture, channeling the strength and wisdom of his ancestors. "We rebuild," he declared, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. "Asgard is not just a place, it's a people. And as long as we stand together, Asgard will never truly fall." A murmur of approval rippled through the survivors, a spark of hope igniting in their eyes. Liam continued, his words gaining strength and conviction with each passing moment. "It won't be easy. The road ahead is long and fraught with challenges. But we are Asgardians. We have faced the twilight of the gods and emerged victorious. Together, We will raise Asgard from these ashes, stronger and more united than ever before." As Liam's speech concluded, a cheer rose from the crowd. The fear and uncertainty that had gripped them began to give way to determination and purpose. They were ready to follow their new leader into this next chapter of their history. Without wasting any time, Liam set to work organizing the rebuilding efforts. He divided the survivors into teams, each tasked with a specific aspect of the reconstruction. Some were sent to salvage what they could from the ruins, while others began clearing debris to make way for new foundations. Liam worked alongside his people, his godly strength put to use in moving massive chunks of debris. As he labored, he couldn't help but reflect on the significance of each stone they laid, each pillar they raised. "This isn't just about rebuilding structures," Liam mused aloud as he worked beside Bjorn. "We're laying the foundation for a new Asgard, one that honors our past while looking towards the future." Bjorn nodded sagely, wiping sweat from his brow. "Indeed, my lord. And it is fitting that you lead us in this task. You embody the best of our old ways and the promise of the new." Days turned into weeks, and slowly but surely, new Asgard began to take shape once more. The work was backbreaking and often frustrating, but there was a sense of shared purpose that united the Asgardians in their task. Liam made sure to work alongside different groups each day, offering encouragement and lending his strength where it was needed most. One evening, as the sun began to set on another day of hard work, Liam found himself standing before the partially rebuilt Great Hall. He placed his hand on one of the newly carved pillars, feeling the smooth stone beneath his fingers. "I hope we're doing right by you, Father," he whispered, his thoughts turning to Thor and all the great kings of Asgard who had come before. "I think they would be proud," a soft voice said from behind him. Liam turned to see Sigrid approaching, her golden hair glowing in the fading light. Despite the dirt and grime that covered her from a day of labor, she was a vision of beauty that took Liam's breath away. "Sigrid?" Liam breathed, a smile softening his features. "I didn't hear you approach." She came to stand beside him, her hand finding his. "You've been working so hard, Liam. We all have. But I worry you're taking too much upon yourself." Liam sighed, feeling the weight of his responsibilities pressing down upon him. "There's so much to do, so many who need help. I can't rest while our people suffer." Sigrid turned to face him, her eyes filled with understanding and something deeper, something that made Liam's heart race. "I know, and that's one of the reasons why—" She paused, taking a deep breath. "Why I love you, Liam Odinson." For a moment, the world seemed to stand still. All the worries and burdens that had been plaguing Liam faded away, leaving only this perfect moment with Sigrid. Without a word, Liam pulled her close, their lips meeting in a kiss that spoke volumes. It was tender and passionate, a reminder of the beauty that still existed in their world, despite all the hardship they had endured. When they finally parted, both slightly breathless, Liam rested his forehead against Sigrid's. "I love you too," he whispered. "You give me strength when I feel like I can't go on." Sigrid smiled, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears of joy. "Then let me be your strength, Liam. Let me stand beside you as we rebuild our home and our future." Hand in hand, they turned to look out over the rebuilding efforts. The setting sun cast a warm glow over the construction, painting the scene in hues of gold and red. For the first time since the battle, Liam felt a true sense of hope blossoming in his chest. As the weeks turned to months, new Asgard slowly but surely rose from the ashes of destruction. The Great Hall was completed, its golden dome once again reaching towards the sky. Homes were rebuilt, gardens replanted, and the sounds of laughter and life began to fill the air once more. On the day that marked 1 year since the battle that had nearly destroyed everything, Liam stood before the gates of New Asgard. The entire population had gathered for this moment, their faces filled with pride and anticipation. "My fellow Asgardians," Liam began, his voice carrying easily over the crowd. 1 year ago, we stood amidst the ruins of our home, battered but not broken. Today we stand before the fruits of our labor, a testament to the indomitable spirit of our people. A cheer rose from the crowd, and Liam felt his heart swell with pride. This new Asgard is more than just buildings and streets, he continued. It is a symbol of our resilience, our unity, and our hope for the future. We have honored the legacy of those who came before us while forging a new path forward. As Liam spoke, the first rays of the morning sun began to peek over the horizon. The light touched the golden spires of New Asgard, setting them ablaze with a radiant glow. A collective gasp of awe swept through the crowd at the breathtaking sight. In that moment, Liam felt a warmth spread through him that had nothing to do with the rising sun. It was as if the very essence of Asgard, the spirit of all those great kings and queens who had ruled before him, was expressing its approval. With this new dawn, Liam declared, his voice thick with emotion, we not only celebrate the rebirth of Asgard, but also the rebirth of ourselves. We have emerged from the crucible of conflict stronger, wiser, and more united than ever before. As the gates of New Asgard swung open, inviting its people into their reborn home, Liam felt a profound sense of accomplishment and purpose. The weight of his ancestors' approval settled upon him not as a burden, but as a mantle of responsibility he was finally ready to bear. Sigrid appeared at his side, slipping her hand into his. "You've done it, Liam," she said softly. "You've led us home." Liam squeezed her hand, his eyes never leaving the sight of his people entering their new home. "No," he replied. "We've done it. All of us. Together." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, bathing New Asgard in its warm light, Liam Odinson stood tall, ready to lead his people into a bright and hopeful future. The great hall of New Asgard was filled to capacity. A sea of faces, both mortal and divine, gathered for this momentous occasion. At the center of it all stood Liam Odinson, his heart pounding like a war drum in his chest. The journey that had brought him to this moment flashed through his mind, from a struggling actor on Midgard to the heir of Thor, tested by trials and tempered in the fires of Ragnarok. Liam's eyes swept across the assembled crowd. He saw the familiar faces of his Asgardian brethren, their eyes shining with pride and hope. Interspersed among them were representatives from the other realms, elves from Alfheim, dwarves from Nidavellir, even a delegation from Midgard. And there, in the front row, stood Sigrid, her smile radiant and encouraging. At the far end of the hall, upon a raised dais, stood the All-Father himself. Though not the Odin of old, this new All-Father had guided the realms through the aftermath of Ragnarok. His single eye seemed to pierce right through Liam, weighing and measuring him one final time. "Liam Odinson," the All-Father's voice boomed, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. "Step forward." Taking a deep breath, Liam walked down the central aisle. Each step felt heavy with the weight of destiny, yet he moved with a grace and purpose that spoke of his readiness for the mantle he was about to assume. As he reached the foot of the dais, Liam knelt, bowing his head in respect and humility. The All-Father spoke again, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "You have been tested, Liam Odinson. Tested by fire and ice, by friend and foe, by the very fabric of the 9 realms themselves. You have faced the twilight of the gods and emerged victorious. Now, you stand ready to take your place as the new Thor, god of thunder and protector of both Asgard and Midgard." A hush fell over the crowd as a group of Valkyries approached, bearing between them a familiar weapon. Mjolnir, the mighty hammer of Thor, seemed to hum with anticipation as it was presented before Liam. As Liam gazed upon Mjolnir, memories washed over him in a flood. He remembered the first time he had lifted the hammer, the surge of power and responsibility that had coursed through him. He recalled the battles fought, the lessons learned, the moments of doubt and triumph that had shaped him into the man, the god he now was. The All-Father's voice cut through Liam's reverie. "Liam Odinson, are you prepared to take the oath of Thor, to wield Mjolnir in defense of the 9 realms, to stand as a bridge between Asgard and Midgard, to embody the ideals of strength, courage, and compassion that define the god of thunder? Liam raised his head, his eyes meeting the Allfather's gaze unflinchingly. "I am," he said, his voice clear and strong. "Then rise and take up your hammer." As Liam stood and reached for Mjolnir, a commotion erupted at the back of the hall. Screams of alarm rang out as a group of cloaked figures burst through the doors, dark energy crackling around them. "Death to the false Thor!" one of the attackers cried, hurling a bolt of shadowy magic towards the dais. Without hesitation, Liam grasped Mjolnir's handle. The hammer's weight, once so daunting, now felt like an extension of his own arm. In one fluid motion, he spun and deflected the magical attack, sending it harmlessly into the ceiling. "Protect the civilians," Liam shouted, his voice carrying the authority of a seasoned leader. The Valkyries and other warriors in attendance quickly moved to shepherd the non-combatants to safety, while Liam strode purposefully towards the attackers. Lightning crackled around Liam's form as he engaged the enemy. Each swing of Mjolnir was precise and powerful, neutralizing the dark sorcerers without causing unnecessary harm or collateral damage. As Liam fought, he found himself filled with a strange sense of calm. This was what he had been preparing for all along, not just to wield power, but to use it responsibly, to protect those who could not protect themselves. The battle was fierce, but brief. Liam's mastery of Mjolnir, combined with the support of the Asgardian warriors, quickly overwhelmed the attackers. As the last of the dark sorcerers fell, disarmed and defeated, a cheer rose up from the assembled crowd. Liam stood in the center of the hall, Mjolnir held high, lightning still dancing across his form. In that moment, there was no doubt in anyone's mind that they were looking at the true heir of Thor, the worthy wielder of Mjolnir. The Allfather's voice rang out once more. "You have proven your worthiness yet again, Liam Odinson. Not just through your strength in battle, but through your leadership and your restraint. The time has come. Kneel and rise again as Thor." With the eyes of all the realms upon him, Liam knelt once more. The Allfather descended from the dais, placing his hand upon Liam's head. "I, Odin Allfather, do hereby name you Thor, god of thunder, protector of Asgard and Midgard, wielder of Mjolnir. May your reign be long and just. May your lightning strike true against the forces of chaos and darkness." A surge of power coursed through Liam, far greater than anything he had experienced before. It was as if the very essence of the storm had taken residence in his soul. When he stood, he was changed, not just in title, but in being. Liam Odinson was gone, and in his place stood Thor, the god of thunder reborn. As the assembled gods and mortals bowed before him, Thor's first act was not one of triumph or bravado. Instead, he turned to the defeated attackers, who were being held by Asgardian guards. "Bring them forward," Thor commanded, his voice resonating with newfound authority. The dark sorcerers were brought before him, their heads bowed in defeat and fear. Thor looked upon them not with anger, but with compassion. "You came here today seeking to prevent what you saw as a falsehood," Thor said, addressing the attackers. "You believe that no mortal could truly be worthy of the mantle of Thor. I understand your doubts, for I have grappled with them myself." A murmur of surprise rippled through the crowd at Thor's words. "But worthiness is not determined by birth or by realm," Thor continued. "It is forged through actions, through choices, through the willingness to stand for what is right, even in the face of overwhelming odds." Thor raised Mjolnir, and for a moment the attackers flinched, expecting retribution. Instead, Thor brought the hammer down gently, shattering the magical bindings that held them. "I offer you a choice," Thor said. "Continue down the path of darkness and face the consequences of your actions, or embrace the opportunity for redemption. For if a mortal can become the god of thunder, then surely those who have strayed can find their way back to the light." The lead attacker looked up, meeting Thor's gaze with a mixture of confusion and awe. You would forgive us? After what we tried to do?" Thor nodded solemnly. "Forgiveness does not erase the past, nor does it guarantee trust. but it offers the chance for a new beginning. The choice is yours. One by one, the attackers knelt before Thor, pledging their loyalty not out of fear, but out of genuine respect and gratitude. As the ceremony concluded and the hall began to empty, Thor found himself surrounded by well-wishers and those seeking his blessing. But his eyes sought out one person in particular. Sigrid made her way through the crowd, her eyes shining with unshed tears of joy and pride. When she reached Thor, she hesitated for a moment, as if unsure how to address him. Thor smiled, pulling her into an embrace. "I'm still me," he whispered. "Just with a few upgrades." Sigrid laughed, the sound like music to Thor's ears. "I always knew you were destined for greatness, Liam. I mean, Thor. But seeing you like this, it's overwhelming," Thor finished for her. "Believe me, I know the feeling." As they stood together looking out over New Asgard and the realms beyond, Thor felt a profound sense of purpose settle over him. He was no longer just Liam Odinson, nor was he simply a copy of the Thor who had come before. He was something new, a bridge between realms, between mortal and divine, between the past and the future. "What happens now?" Sigrid asked, her hand finding Thor's. Thor gazed out at the horizon, where the branches of Yggdrasil stretched out across the cosmos. "Now," he said, his voice filled with determination and hope, "we build the future. We protect both Asgard and Midgard. We forge new alliances. We face whatever challenges may come." He turned to Sigrid, his eyes alight with the power of the storm and the warmth of love. "And we do it together." As the sun set on New Asgard, painting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Thor, the new god of thunder, stood ready to face whatever the future might hold. With Mjolnir in his hand, the wisdom of his journey in his heart, and the love of his people as his strength, he looked to the horizon with hope and determination. The age of the new Thor had begun, and with it, a new chapter in the history of the 9 realms.